G'day, May 40 here. So I haven't streamed much the last 3 days because I just didn't feel like it. Why didn't I feel like it? Because I just wasn't getting good quality sleep. The difference between a night of good quality sleep and a night without good quality sleep is night and day. It's just so dramatic. And so when I can muster the will to just leave my CPAP on, the difference all night, all right, that's fantastic. All right, the more I can leave my CPAP on the better. But doggone it, often I'm afraid I just leave it on for a few minutes just to open up the nostrils, then I take it off again, and here we go. So here we go. So this is the bloody CPAP, and I am so much better when I'm wearing my sleep pap. All right, much higher quality sleep, but usually I find it an annoyance. It just ticks me off. It bothers me. And so it's like, what the hell? Let's get this thing, let's get this torture device off of me. I know a lot of people who don't mind their CPAP. It's fine. It's good. And doggone it, there are times when I've actually enjoyed having my CPAP on. It does the breathing through me. Good old Dennis Prager, he's supposedly off the respirator these days. And so he's just using a CPAP. So Dennis Prager, getting onto a CPAP all day during his waking hours, that's an improvement. But for me, spoiled brat that I am, it's just annoying. So this is what I normally use. One pillow on top of this. So I think that's about 6 inches. Or when I lie down, it's when I lie on my back and I'm looking up, it's exactly 6 inches. I just throw a nice classy pillow like this, deep dark blue. I think the Persians should like this color, and it's not enough, but it's better than nothing, and it's better than 2 pillows. All right, but here is the master wedge, right? This is a man-sized wedge. And when I lie down on this, right, that always opens up my nostrils. I don't know what it is about nighttime, but my nostrils start to close down. And even though I put that tape over my nostrils to try to open them up, it's not sufficient. But when I lie down on this baby, all right, with that amount of wedge, all right, then my nostrils open up. The downside is after 3 days or so of doing this, 2 days, that I just got killer lower back pain. And so I'm just kind of oscillating, but I'll go through all 3 of these in a night. I'll start off with the CPAP and get ticked with it, and then use the small wedge, and then bloody hell, then I can't get my nostrils. I'm breathing through my mouth. I also like to use my Fisher Wallace. That's first thing in the evening, along with my 1 gram of magnesium and the clonidine and some almond milk, and then a little bit of gum to just get the taste out of my mouth. And then this is my mouth guard, because without this, I just start grinding my teeth. So this is some of the good stuff. But what the heck? Last night I had the big old wedge. And so I got a good fair dinkum night of sleep. So that's why I'm up and about, and I'll be in a retirement home in 10 years. Bro, I've got the body of a 49-year-old man. Okay, when I'm done with this show, I'm going outside and I'm going to do 4 pull-ups in a row. Killer lower back pain. Are you feeling like Luigi? But here's what I think is going on. If I just do more core exercises, so do more planks and other core exercises, I don't think I'm going to have the lower back pain. So I'm really been working on my core. So I haven't been doing much live streaming the last few days, but you'll be glad to know I've been working on my core. And so if I can work on my core and then use that big old wedge so that my nostrils are always open, then please God, then I'll have a good fair dinkum night sleep, every night, and I won't have the debilitating, crippling lower back pain. So to work the core, got to do the planks, got to do the McKenzie exercises for lower back pain, and then I'll be fair dinkum, and I'll be able to do the kind of intense, enthusiastic, passionate, high quality live streams that you have grown to know and to love. Now, you're probably wondering what the heck is going on with good old Dennis Prager. And I've got updates, right? We've got updates, and we're using Grok to try to figure out what the heck is going on with Dennis Prager. And so he's off the respirator. Got an older post here declining America sliding to how to avoid getting conned. Okay, debanking. I know there's an update here, Hollywood versus America. I know there's an update here somewhere about Dennis Prager, the Lily Phillips challenge to liberalism. Bloody hell. No one has the faintest idea how to prevent major mental illness. Lily Phillips sleeps with 100 men in a day. I swear, everybody wants to change the world. Look, there is a Dennis Prager update. What is a hero system? Does Kamala have a drinking problem? Why did the news media hide Joe Biden's senility? Conservative claims of cultural oppression. Left fawns over Luigi Mangione. Why did conservatives rebel against COVID? There is a Dennis Prager update here. I wouldn't lie to you. I wouldn't tell you that something was not true. If you listed 5 chapters on, what the heck? This is not like me. Normally, I am so prepared. My God, let's listen to some
economies of Africa and supply resources for America. He came. He did not have to. He insisted on it and was proud to be the first president to come. This is the twilight of Mr. Biden's presidency.
Do not come. You want to come? I say to you, do not come. You must save your vital bodily essence and not just splooge it everywhere. Do not come.
Presidency, the final days of the final chapter of an epic half-century political journey that has had more than its share of twists and turns. Time is catching up with Mr. Biden. He looks a little older and a little slower with each passing day. Aides say he remains plenty sharp in the Situation Room, calling world leaders to broker a ceasefire in Lebanon or deal with the chaos of Syria's rebellion. And now the line that I highlighted, which brings it all home. But it's hard to imagine that he seriously thought he could do the world's most stressful job for another 4 years. This is Marc Halperin. Marc, when I read that line, I said, Marc's going to read that line and say, and why didn't you say so 6 months ago or a year ago? Because it can't be that they just figured that out. Am I right?
Well, Michael, like the old married couple that you and I are, you knew that I was going to include in the newsletter, and I knew you were going to ask me about it because this is so important. And of course, the way you tagged that sentence is the way I tagged it in my head. It's just kind of incredible that now the New York Times, handing down tablets from on high, says, well, of course, he couldn't possibly have served 4 years. And yet from, say, 2022 to 24 in the debate, you didn't read much in the New York Times questioning whether Joe Biden was up to being president for 4 more years. You read a lot about Donald Trump being in.
Okay, enough about Joe Biden. Let's talk about Dennis Prager. According to a December 11th video from PragerU CEO Marissa Straight, Dennis is no longer breathing through a ventilator most of the time. He said he's usually breathing through a CPAP. I love how all the people who actually know what's going on with Dennis Prager, they say, oh, we want to tell you, we want to be fully transparent, we want to be open with you, but they're incredibly closed-mouthed, incredibly restrictive about the information they let out. What the heck? Glenn Beck comes through with the biggest, I think this was the biggest scoop yet. This is the first time we find out what really happened to Dennis Prager. This is a Glenn Beck video from December 4.
And Dennis Prager, who, by the way, let me give you an update on him. He was severely injured. He fell in the shower, hit his head, and it snapped his neck back, and he has injuries to his neck. And he is making progress, and only Dennis would be as positive. I mean, somehow or another, he's still like, I'm I'm doing great. And it's going to be a long process to get him back. But he wasn't able to breathe on his own, but that is over, and he spoke for the first time here last couple of days. So, and he's fully there. His body just isn't working, but he has a long road, but he is doing better, and believe.
Okay, that's the first time we found out what the heck happened to Dennis. He fell in the shower, hit his head. Okay, prior to that, Ryan Hill had an excellent idea. So he posted December 16. The information regarding Dennis Prager's injury from his fall has seemed a little strange to me. I keep seeing the reports that he's in the hospital and to pray for him, but almost no info as to what actually is wrong. So I asked Grok to analyze. Here's what I got. So Ryan wrote into Grok, what are the details of the most recent medical downturn of conservative talk show host Dennis Prager? I'm aware that he fell and is in the hospital. Please provide more detail as to how his fall led to his extended hospital stay. Initial reports confirmed that Prager was hospitalized due to a back injury sustained from a fall, with doctors needing time to evaluate treatment. Progress has been described as slow and steady, with a lot of swelling and inflammation around his neck and upper spine, which has delayed a definitive prognosis. There was an indication his condition taking a turn for the worse at some point, with a diagnosis of pneumonia complicating his recovery. Underwent surgery after the fall. Social media posts have asked for prayers, emphasized the gravity of his situation with mentions of spinal injury and being on a ventilator, indicating severe respiratory complications or concerns. All right, back to Ryan writes into Grok. Based on the details of Dennis Prager's injury, does this suggest he is being paralyzed? There are indications that Dennis Prager's injury might involve sublevel of paralysis or significant mobility issues. Right, people are entitled to privacy, but given how many are calling for prayers, I think it's strange we don't even know what's going on. Is he paralyzed? Why are doctors assessing options? Why is the recovery process one that requires patience? And then Angel responds, Dennis's pneumonia had been diagnosed before his fall by some weeks. The fall may have occurred with weakness and still recovering from pneumonia. And then Glenn Beck says, Dennis Prager fell in the shower, hit his head, and it snapped his neck back. So Dennis Prager couldn't breathe on his own, spoke for the first time a couple of weeks ago, but he's doing great. All right. He has a long road. That is the talking point. Again and again and again, we always hear he has a long road.
Indicted. We didn't read much about Joe Biden, and there's all sorts of implications of that, not just for journalism and for the country, but for the world. And that was despite the fact that public opinion polls showed that like 3/4 of Americans had doubt, and despite the fact that that Joe Biden did a lot of things in public, not in private, that demonstrated a loss of acuity that I saw back in 2017. And finally, I'll say the failure of the press within this piece and in general to acknowledge that not only did they participate in the cover-up and allow themselves to be lied to and browbeaten by the Biden team up through the debate, but then right after Biden stepped down, after several weeks after the debate, he stepped down from the ticket, they went back to pretending it never happened. I don't think I've seen a single story in the dominant media saying, is this guy really?
And Elliot says you need more sleep as you get older. I find I need less sleep. Right. I am able to, overall, I feel that I need less sleep, and I'm better able to function with less sleep now than when I was younger.
Qualified to continue in the office at this time. If he wasn't qualified to continue to run for president. And so.
Right. There hasn't been one story about how if Joe Biden isn't qualified to run for president, he's certainly not qualified to be president. Well, why has there not been one mainstream media news story about that?
I found this story, again, quoting Biden officials credulously. He's right on top of that subject matter. He's in the Situation Room. He's making the hard decisions. He's tireless. These things are just patently, at a minimum, should be questioned and not just reprinted.
This is one of a dozen, quote unquote, secret wars that you write about today. And on this, you say dominant media journalists who think it is time to come clean on Joe Biden's level of mental acuity, both now and during his full term, versus those in the press who want to continue to credit staff accounts of how completely in command the commander-in-chief still is, and then you link to the Times story that I quoted from. And this brings me no joy. I'm sure it brings you no joy to even have this conversation, but I think it needs to be had. Will there be more written, or do you think that the Times kind of buttons it up as far as what you refer to as the dominant media's willingness to address it?
I don't think there'll be much more written in the short term. I think some honest and enterprising reporter is going to write a piece about that quotes one or two Trump, Biden White House insiders who start to lay bare the reality of how corrupt the effort was to hide the extent of Joe Biden's loss of mental acuity. And I think that story will open up the discussion more than it's been.
Born of a fear of Donald Trump, right? That everybody that we're talking about, their hair was on fire at the prospect of Trump being elected, and that was their rationalization, I guess, for looking the other way. I'd say easily the biggest part of it, but I think also,
again, the Biden team threatened reporters who stepped out of line on these questions with a loss of access. And they felt like, why should I be accused of helping Donald Trump win and make it much harder to do my job?
Also, relative to today's newsletter and the dozen secret wars, those who want to cut off Trump's access to his people via mobile phone and in person once he takes office versus those who think such a move is neither possible nor advisable. I paid close attention, as I know you did on Monday, to that hour-plus long presser at Mar-a-Lago. Very freewheeling, came out, had a statement about a foreign investment of $100 billion, but then took on all comers and responded on a whole variety of different issues that were put to him. This phone issue that you raised, does it also extend to trying to rein him in, or does no one try to even rein him in a second term?
Well, I don't know what accounts for his demeanor, much less pugnacious for the most part, much less lashing out in both the Meet the Press interview and the press conference. And I don't think he's doing it just on his own. I do think there's some intervention there. He should continue to be scrutinized. He continues not to tell the truth. He continues to have policy inconsistencies. He continues to pose a threat to some norms that are important, not just niceties. All that needs to be done. At the same time, just objectively, again, I'll say to your listeners who don't like when I say stuff like this, I'm not rooting for Trump, although I do root for all American presidents to succeed, but I'm not his political supporter. But this is not just one of the most active presidential transitions we've seen. By any sensible metric, it's one of the most successful. Doesn't mean he'll be successful in January, but he's doing a lot, including his demeanor, to advance his case to get things done. And that's the point of being president. It's not to enjoy the perks. The point of it is to fulfill the campaign promises that the people voted for. And I think he's laying the groundwork for that. And part of that is a less pugnacious style. The style he displayed in the press conference is pretty much exactly what you and I have heard from Republicans and some Democrats, consultants and elected officials for literally years. If Trump could only be for his issue positions that are popular, but in a less pugnacious style, that'd be a politically powerful, politically potent position. And that's where he is right now. It could change, but that's where he is right now.
So the Times piece that I made reference to a moment ago notes that Trump he's already dominating the conversation. And I would say, and it looks as if President Biden is happy to have that be the case. You know, I don't see that he's publicly trying to maintain the spotlight until the final day, and the deference that's being paid to Trump in the media and by world leaders, by everybody essentially. He's essentially acting as if he's the president already.
Yeah, there's never been anything like it. It's a strange confluence. You know, I think under discussed, and I've written about this a little bit, is we haven't had a second-term president like this. Most second-term presidents win by less than they won by the first time. Their mandate is sort of less substantial because they leverage the benefits of incumbency to continue for 4 more years. They're surrounded by people who are kind of exhausted who stay on after serving in the first term. And they don't have a real good sense of momentum. It's more like continuity. And they didn't have much time to think about a second term because they went right from first term to second term. None of that is true with Trump. He had 4 years to write executive orders and to think about mistakes he made. He seems to have a lot of energy despite all he's been through. And he's got this validation of a very specific agenda, having won the popular vote for the first time. So that, and he's impatient to get going. And of course, Trump doesn't care about the one president at a time thing, except to the extent that he's the one president now. So, and Biden, because of the pardon, because of his loss of mental acuity, because of the degree to which he and the party are kind of stunned at the outcome, Biden is not completely off the stage, but he would have to do a lot to get coverage of anything he does, beyond just sort of rote coverage of Biden said this in a speech. So I've never seen anything like this, and it's not close. I've been trying to think of the transition I've covered that's the closest to this. It might be from Bush to Clinton in '92. Clinton did some stuff, and Bush was kind of shocked about losing and stepped back to some extent, but nothing like this.
Secret war number 7, according to you, those who think that the Trump cabinet picks represent a beautiful mosaic that looks like America versus those who think, despite the best efforts of Don Jr. and Tucker, the government in formation still contains too many squishes. Expand on that and tell me what you think the state of affairs is right now for Hegseth, for Gabbard, for RFK Jr. et al.
Well, I think the base case is that they all get confirmed, but I do think it's dependent on strong performances at their confirmation hearings and an absence of new disclosures that Republicans find damaging. I think some of them may get some Democratic votes, but it's really largely a game of keeping almost all or all the Republicans together. Look, there's not a person picked who doesn't have some positive traits. And you take Bobby Kennedy. People who are familiar with like his positions on things, in my experience, generally love something he's for. Like they might love the notion of making food healthier, and then there's something they don't like. But that's true of lots of people in our personal lives, lots of people in politics. And nobody's perfect. I think the flaws and the challenges for 4 or 5 of the remaining picks are it's exacerbated by the press, but there's also legitimate questions to be raised. So the MAGA machinery, both the formal transition as well as their outside allies, really has us down now. And I think they were a little bit caught off guard by the Gates thing, Matt Gates. I think the Hegseth near-death experience in terms of his nomination also was kind of a chastening moment for them. And now the machinery's up and running. And so I think if you see Hegseth or others encounter trouble in January, because I don't think there's a likelihood of any December problems, I think you'll see the machinery gear up. And I think, as again, barring some change in trajectory, I think you'll get these folks confirmed.
Let's spend a moment and before we wind down the year together and talk about the Democratic side of the aisle. One of those issues, one of those secret wars that you talk about today, those who think Kamala Harris has a bright and dominating position in the Democratic Party versus those who don't. There's a battle taking place now for leadership of the DNC. Where is the Democratic Party? I guess I would ask Marc Halperin a week before Christmas in the aftermath of the 2024 loss.
I think there's very little that's occurred since the election.
Yeah, that's the upshot. There's very little that's occurred since the election with the Democratic Party. So I was watching the NBA Cup last night. It was Oklahoma versus, was it Minneapolis, Minnesota? And there's this 60-second ad that comes on celebrating the joys of gay life while promoting the HIV drug Cabenuva. And do a lot of gays watch the NBA? So it's so easy to avoid getting HIV, right? Don't have unprotected backdoor sex and don't share intravenous needles, right? And when this is too much, right? These two demands, they're just too much for you. Then take drugs such as Cabenuva. These HIV drugs, they're only for a population that wants to have abundant, unprotected sex with strangers. Right? Do you participate in anonymous gay alley sex? Ask your doctor about Cabenuva to see if it's right for you. That's the Laponius perspective. It's repugnant that this is on just regular TV. Cabenuva's commercial says it's geared towards adults who are undetectable. All right, you even have Saturday Night Live doing skits on this stuff. And then another drug maker has released a statement on its Instagram saying is the victim of an anti-trans and anti-non-binary trolling attack, says that their controversial drag thong performance for the babies is age appropriate because infants don't comprehend what's happening. Another comment on X. It's hard to find any sage commentary from a Google search on this topic, but I love the guy in the Cabenuva ad that tells you to live in the moment. Any more good advice? Watching A&E channel the last couple of days, they are bombarding us with ads for HIV monthly injections. And then you watch the American Family channel, and you get bombarded. Here we got a post on Quora. I don't want to be associated with the lifestyle presented in these HIV commercials bombarding the TV programs I watch with my family. All my friends and their families also object, but we don't know how to stop it. Changing channels is useless. What an adult chooses to do privately is their business. But why are we being saturated with these HIV commercials? Do the majority of the population have any say in this? We're being forced to watch these commercials produced by those pushing products needed by a very tiny, small percentage of the whole population that needs to have unprotected sex with strangers. Perhaps small children should not be seeing these kind of commercials, especially over and over and over again, day after day. And then there's a gay website, poz.com, pause.com. TV commercials for prescription meds are common these days, but for some viewers enjoying holiday movies on the Great American Family channel, countering ads for HIV meds featuring same-sex couples felt like getting a lump of coal in their Christmas stocking. Love the movies, but have you removed the very non-family-friendly AIDS drug ad with two men kissing? Unfortunately, we don't have control over local commercials, the company responded, and we sincerely apologize. This is outrageous. It is just so incredibly inflammatory, provocative, upsetting, disturbing. Oy. Well, at least California now is finally tackling the tough issues.
California's really gotten their priorities in order. Liberal San Francisco is about to crack down, not on homelessness, not on drugs, on fat shaming. Their health department has reportedly hired a fat positivity expert to consult on the pressing issue of weight stigma and weight neutrality. And here's a taste of the ideology taxpayers will be footing the bill for.
The message I always got from my doctor was shrink your body by any means necessary. And it really felt like there was a sense of a don't ask, don't tell.
All right, Jessica, we have to go to you first.
Do you?
And just take the whole time. Let's just you and I talk here. Define fat neutrality.
I think it means.
Okay, that's about all I can take there. There's an excellent breakdown on the drone situation on Marc Halperin show this morning. A lot of good stuff on the Halperin show this morning. Let's get started
White House,
here.
You know, he can call, he can be on video, whatever. He can be on text chains, but it's just not going to be the same level of minute-by-minute influence he appears to have now.
Yep.
All right, Bill Clinton. Not Bill Clinton, sorry. Joe Biden. Amazing to me, has not been a single story in the dominant media about the arc of his, not just his mental acuity decline, but the coverage of it. Because up until the debate where Joe Biden's fate changed, the press acted like there was nothing to see here. There was no serious decline. Maybe he was walking a little bit slower. That was it. Then the debate happens, and the press's attitude is, oh, my goodness, he can't be the nominee because he's got all this mental decline. Then he gets off the ticket, and Harris replaces him, and they're back to nothing to see here. It's fine for him to be president, fine for him to serve out the term. Nothing wrong with our coverage that we didn't tell you for the first 3.5 years that he had this huge mental decline. All of this comes to something of a head in a New York Times story published this morning by Peter Baker. I think there was a second byline on it, but I recognize the hand of Peter heavy here on this story. This story basically says, has an anecdote.
And why isn't Marc Halperin have a more prominent position in the news media hierarchy? Because he got Me Too'd about 8 years ago, and he was driven out of the mainstream news media.
Anecdotes from his recent foreign trips, which they suggest perhaps raise some questions about his stamina. And here's, for me, the money paragraph. This is the twilight of Mr. Biden's presidency, the final days, the final chapter of an epic half-century political journey that has had more than its share of twists and turns. Time is catching up with Mr. Biden. He looks a little older and a little slower with each passing day. That's quite a statement. Each passing day. Maybe there's poetic license on that one. Aides say he remains plenty sharp in the Situation Room, calling world leaders to broker a ceasefire in Lebanon or deal with the chaos of Syria's rebellion. But it is hard to imagine that he seriously thought he could do the world's most stressful job for another 4 years. And the line I'd read after that is, and it's hard to believe that the New York Times did not tell its readers this up until the debate, even though this was a question to at least be debated and which was widely reflected in public opinion polls that showed voters had a lot of doubts about his serving 4 more years. So, Dan, where are we in the media and public debate about Joe Biden's mental acuity decline as it pertains to the next 20 days, as well as the history of his administration?
Oh, I think we're not even on the first page of the first chapter that will ultimately be written. I think there's a lot more to come. I mean, that story yesterday was somewhat sad to read because it's so little, so late. Look, you go back to, I think it was 2 years ago when he stopped going up the front stairs to Air Force One. And they kind of tried to brush it under the, oh, there's nothing here. He's still plenty sharp, right? You talked about when he referred to the dead Congresswoman. Look, I think one of the things that has to be talked about is kind of how did Donald Trump get off the mat after 2021? You know, how did he rise back up from the ashes of January 6th when he was basically a pariah within the party to where he is now? And part of that reason, I think, is Joe Biden was so absent from the public in terms of using the bully pulpit, being out there. Like, if he's still sharp as a tack, then why isn't he out, you know, in public doing more things, attending more stuff? Right?
Or having a press conference or doing an interview with a serious journalist.
Right. I mean, if nothing else, try to shape your legacy beyond a speech at a think tank, you know, for 15 minutes. Like, so I think there's going to be a lot more. I think there will probably be, you know, the first aide that writes the tell-all book probably is going to get a fortune for doing it. And then, the dam will be broken if Mr. Halperin doesn't beat them all to it. And I think that even thinking about the next 30 days, I've said this a few times recently, you know, at times it makes me sad, but also kind of angry that, like, our party is stuck in the position it is because we refuse to have this public conversation. We refuse to even, you know, admit what the rest of the public has seen now for the last 3 or 4 years. And so our hands are tied and we're basically waiting for him to leave to kind of do the rebuild. But we have no one to blame but ourselves in this position.
Dan, do you really think that somebody, I was going to say, Dan, do you think that somebody will write that book?
Yes. I think there's too much financial incentive. And I think there will be some sense of guilt that some people have. And I just think it'll be too tempting to not say, here are all the times where, you know, we were aghast and it started. I mean, I feel very confident that on that 2020 campaign, I know people saw it, and it's why they kept him so guarded.
Yeah. I saw it in 2017. Before, Sean, you come in and talk about the media and Biden, we're going to go to your questions in a moment. Please raise your electronic hand if you'd like to be part of the conversation. We're asking folks today, tell us something you'd like different about the morning meeting. More something, less of something.
That an organization like the New York Times that loves to preach about, you know, not gaslighting people and misinformation continues to soft pedal this. I see these stories about, oh, the media is under attack and you know, the industry is facing these. And it's like, this is the reason why, because you don't do your job. You lie to the American people, you gaslight them, and then you wonder why it's happening. So it's just, to me, it's a pathetic state of the industry as a whole.
Yeah, I can't disagree.
And by the way, it's no wonder when we saw that polling the other day where you wonder why sometimes people have two completely different views of where the world stands. It's because when people getting their information from the New York Times or NBC versus streaming outlets and whatever, they're seeing two different realities. We discuss things, and I think in a very open, honest way that they won't do.
Yeah. I just think quoting aides as they do in that story, not by name, but anonymous aides saying he's right on top of that subject matter. He's in the sit room. He's got it all together. He's got all this stamina. I mean, I just think we're past that point. If you want to give their point of view any credence, you have to put it in a lot sharper relief to say that they're claiming it without evidence and that it runs counter to what we can see with our own eyes. But to just have the story be quote unquote balanced by having their claims that he's right on top of it, it's just not. It's just not right.
That, by the way, to your point, like, he's sharp as a tack, and I mean, that's insane.
It's ridiculous. It's insane. And I'll tell you, Dan, I think before there's a book, you're going to see a magazine story written by a reporter with deep sources in Biden world, quoting at least 2 people, one by name and one on background, saying exactly what you said, saying we saw this forever. There was a team, a special team in place to manage it. Ron Klain was involved. After he left, the team continued without his direct daily involvement. I think you'll see that before book. Books just take a long time. So stand by for that.
Marc,
All
can I
right.
ask one real insider question?
Yeah.
To Dan's point, based on how the industry has been viewing Biden books, I actually question whether or not there's a publisher that cares, that thinks that they can make money off that book.
Yeah, there have been a few Biden book contracts out there. I think that the challenge is for the reason you said, publishers are going to be reluctant to try Biden books because they've all failed. I think, and I'll just be open, maybe this will be me, but I think the book that's going to be done is someone who writes a book that's not just a Biden book, but a Biden and Trump book, or maybe even broader than that.
On the election.
And you include the Biden stuff in there, but you've got to have sources on both sides, and that's what makes it a challenge, because unfortunately for America, there are very few reporters left to have sources on both sides. All right, CNN is reporting moments ago that in a reversal, the House Ethics Committee has now secretly voted to release the Matt Gaetz report. The morning meeting. This is the all-time best. Drone expert, Met Secret Service, DOD, DHS.
Okay, this guy's great. I mean, he looks just what you would expect a drone expert to look like. All right, do you think he's fair dinkum? He sounds fair dinkum to me. I don't know a lot about drones, but they've always struck me as a considerably more intense form of chaos in a society because there's just no easy way to control the use of them.
Now, you might be an actor, or you might be the real deal. Sir, what is your name? Where are you? What's up with that screen name?
Hey, Marc. So my name is Scott Talcott. I live in Boise, Idaho. And you called on me a few weeks ago to talk about Russia offline. And I worked on what's called counter-drone systems. So these are systems that are meant to find the drones in the sky, detect them, track them, and then, when possible, to try to take them down. And as I said, I have met with people from Secret Service, DOD, DHS, FBI, and other government agencies about counter-drone systems.
So, Scott, have you met with them in the context of the current situation in New Jersey and the Northeast, or just over the months and years?
Over the months and years, but this is a technology that doesn't change much, specifically radars. So I think it's relevant what I'm going to share. And it's really important. Huh? Okay.
Go ahead.
So basically, this is the big story about drones, and no one's talking about it. And this is publicly available information right now. The big story is that the government is unable to effectively protect us from drones, and especially large crowds in urban environments. And allow me to say this because I can back it up. This means the U.S. government may not be able to effectively protect people who attend the inauguration in January. And I say that very carefully. The facts supporting this view are in plain view. So let's think about the statement that DHS, FBI, FAA, and DOD on Monday. And there are 4 key points that aren't being discussed. First, you may recall they said they're going to send advanced detection technology and trained visual observers. I mean, this is absurd. What are trained visual observers going to do? The drones fly at night, high speeds, and often miles away. I've been to countless counter-drone demonstrations in the daytime, and I've never seen a trained visual observer. Okay, what does this mean? About the advanced detection technology? If we need trained visual observers, it means the advanced detection technology either can't effectively detect and track the drones, or we don't have enough of this technology to cover the area concerned. In my view, it's both. Third, I think this is the most important admission from the U.S. government in the statement. They state that such sightings near or over DOD installations are not true. And I know that to be true as well. And then you had a DOD representative come out and say that basically this is nothing new. So how is this possible? Because we're talking about some of the most secret operations of the U.S. government, and we can't stop drones from flying over these sites. So I'm almost done here, just a little bit more if you don't mind.
Sir.
It doesn't talk anything about technology to stop or take down drones. If you want to assure the public that everything was under control, you would want to indicate that we have the technology to stop these potential drone threats. So this omission is telling. And then 2 more quick things. So let me add some context about urban environments. So you compare to the flat open area of a military base, it is 10 times more difficult to detect, track, and stop drones in an urban environment. And I won't go into the details unless you want me to. And then finally, we need to mention a couple high-profile drone incidents. Okay, think about large public events in the open. You think about college and NFL games that come to mind. So during the
we had all sorts of flights disrupted at LAX because of drones.
Same weekend in September 2022, drones interrupted a University of Washington and Seattle Seahawks football game. I don't know if anybody was aware of that. Some of it went on for 15 or 20 minutes. But in both cases, the unauthorized drone operator was not found. And there have been other cases of drones flying into football stadiums. You may not have heard about the famous Gatwick Airport incident from December 19th to 21st. The airport, this is real business, was shut down for several days and over 1,000 flights were canceled. And the drone operator was never found. And then in August of 2018, drones carrying explosives detonated near the president of Venezuela. So these
and a drone carrying explosive detonated at the vacation home of Israeli Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu while he was inside.
Incidents show that drone threats are real and difficult, if nearly impossible, to stop. So my questions are simple. It's about the trust in the government, really. And so given recent events, do you believe the U.S. government can effectively detect, track, and stop drones? And once again, I say this very carefully. I think there's too much hysteria about the idea of finding nuclear weapons. I mean, all you have to do is take those nuclear weapons outside of Jersey and you're fine. So this is, I'm very careful in saying this. Do you believe radars are the emerging technology? I mean, instead of finding an eagle, right, with these traditional drone systems, you're looking for a mosquito. So the radars don't really work. The drone radars are still kind of under development. The best radar comes from RADA, which is made in Israel. So first of all, we can't really detect and track them. It's a very difficult thing to do, even kind of in controlled environments. And the range of these radars, to give you an idea, depending on the environments, is only 5 kilometers to 10 kilometers. So, and if you want to shoot one down over an open public, you know, what are you going to use? I mean, our systems tested lasers. We even were working with innovative high-powered microwaves. You don't want that happening in, you know, in a public environment. You know, are you going to shoot a missile at it? I mean, what happens there in an open public environment? And of course, there's jamming, but even hobbyists can create drones that kind of basically signal hop. So if you're able to identify one Wi-Fi spectrum, then okay, we think we've got them, we can jam, and then they hop to another one. So these drone technologies are pretty straightforward, and the ability to take them down is very limited, especially in an urban environment.
Know much about this subject other than as a sports fan. I know the NFL has been asking Congress and the FAA to deal with this because of the issue of drones flying over stadiums. They've been the most aggressive of the, you know, compared to Major League Baseball and the NCAA, asking for some help.
You were in charge of designing a plan to protect the inauguration. What would it look like?
Really what you have to do, and I'm sure they'll have security everywhere, is you have to stop the operator before they get the drone in the sky. That's really
right. That you have to stop the operator before they get the drone in the sky. Once the drone is in the sky, right, there's not much that you can do.
Really what they're going to do. But keep that in mind, that level of security won't exist, you know, at public events and in other areas. What I want to share with this is two things real quick. Why am I trying to raise this alarm? It's because first, we're working in the industry, and this has happened in other kind of sectors as well, and nobody's listening to us. And we always said, you know what, it's going to take a catastrophic event to get the attention that this deserves. And then the other thing is, and Vivek Ramaswamy,
I absolutely agree with him. All right, you're going to have a drone with explosives causing a major disruption to American life.
He talks about it is, you know, stop treating us like children, you know, just be open with us and, you know, let us know what's going on. And then we can address the situation. But if we stay, you know, in this world of lies and misinformation and incompetence, sooner or later it's going to happen. So yeah, protecting a very large event like the inauguration. Yeah, I know all the radars. This is publicly available information. You can even type into Grok, right? Hey, why are counter drone systems ineffective? All this information is out there available.
Okay, so I typed into Grok, why are counter drone systems ineffective? And it's exactly what he said. Right. Rapid evolution of drone technology, detection challenges, legal and regulatory constraints, cost versus benefit, operational environment, adaptation by adversaries. Right? Existing defenses are not very defensive and effective with protecting against drones. And then this reminds me of something I read right at the beginning of the best book on the U.S. Secret Service. It's called Zero Fail, The Rise and Fall of the Secret Service by Washington Post reporter Carol Leonig. And it begins with an anecdote of a Secret Service agent pushing a Delta Force sergeant to give him his opinion on the Secret Service. And the Delta Force sergeant says, I feel sorry for you guys. The service has let you down. You'll never be able to stop a real attack. So it wasn't the answer that the Secret Service agent had hoped for. And as he listened to the sergeant dissect Secret Service's outdated equipment and spotty training, his stomach grew queasy. Deep down, he knew how ill-equipped and out of date the Secret Service was. But hearing it articulated by someone he respected made it impossible to deny. He thought about all the times in which his Secret Service unit had narrowly avoided a major international incident. He was now facing a brutal truth. The Secret Service was fulfilling a zero-fail mission based not on its skills, people, training, or technology, but on dumb luck. How long would it be before that luck ran out? He knew that many dedicated agents within the Secret Service were experiencing a growing sense of disillusionment, especially with the agency's leadership, but fear of repercussions had kept them silent until the stakes got too high. All right, we have Bret Stephens writing a rare column that I'm reading by Bret Stephens, and that's purely because of the headline, Done with Never Trump. Right, I want to hear this.
Done with Never Trump. This article is by Bret Stephens and read by an automated voice. It's been more than 9 years since I first denounced Donald Trump as a loudmouth vulgarian appealing to quieter vulgarians. I've called myself a never-Trump conservative ever since, even when I agreed with his policies from time to time. I also opposed him throughout his run this year. Could his second term be as bad as his most fervent critics fear? Yes. Is it time to drop the heavy moralizing and incessant doomsaying that typified so much of the never-Trump movement, and that rendered it politically impotent and frequently obtuse? Yes, please.
Yes, because people only make sense within particular contexts. Right? There are situations where Donald Trump will act in the national interest. There will be other situations where he'll be petty and crooked and act against the national interest. There'll be situations where Kamala Harris would do a better job as chief executive than Donald Trump. Right? There will be situations where socialists will be better equipped to deal with a threat than, say, libertarian free market types. There'll be other situations where a xenophobic police state will be the best response. And people behave differently in different situations. So my father was a big deal to thousands of people, but there were some people who put my father on a pedestal until they got to know him, and then they took him down from that pedestal. There have even been a handful of people who had me on a pedestal until they got to know me, and they took me down from a pedestal. Right? There are situations where my father was sterling, and then other situations where he was highly unimpressive. There are certain situations where I thrive, and then other situations where I suck.
Who and what is Trump? He's a man and the symbol of a movement. The man is crass but charismatic, ignorant but intuitive, dishonest but authentic. The movement is patriotic and angry. Some of that anger is intensely bigoted and some of it misplaced. That side of the anger gets most of the media's attention. But some of it, too, is correctly directed at a self-satisfied elite that thinks it knows better but often doesn't, whether the subject is COVID.
Right, Donald Trump is deeply flawed. And he's right on the basic issues facing the United States. He's not particularly good at running things, but when he has someone he respects like Susie Wiles running his campaign, and he basically follows Susie Wiles's advice, right? When you have a more disciplined Donald Trump, then you have a far more formidable operator than the buffoon who we saw in May and June and July and August and September and October of 2020.
Restrictions, immigration policy, or how to get our allies to pay more for their defense. It's Trump's sulfurous contempt for that elite, his refusal to be shaped by their norms or shamed by their scorn, and his willingness to call out their hypocrisy that makes him a hero to his followers. Cases in point, how come so many who denounced Trump as a sexual predator were 20 years earlier Bill Clinton's steadfast defenders? Why were the same people who demanded investigations into every corner of the Trump family's business dealings so incurious about the Biden family's dealings, like the curiously high prices for Hunter's paintings? Never Trumpers, I include myself in this indictment, never quite got the point. It wasn't that we'd forgotten Clinton's scandals or were ignorant of the allegations about the Bidens. It's that we thought Trump degraded the values that conservatives were supposed to stand for. We also thought that Trump represented a form of IL liberalism that was antithetical to our free people, free markets, free world brand of conservatism, and that was bound to take the Republican Party down a dark road. In this we weren't wrong. There's plenty to dislike and fear about Trump from a traditionally conservative standpoint, but never-Trumpers also overstated our case and in doing so defeated our purpose. How so? We warned that Trump would be a reckless president who might stumble into World War III. If anything, his foreign policy in his first term was in practice often cautious to a fault. We hyperventilated about his odd chumminess with Vladimir Putin. But the collusion allegations were a smear, and Trump's Russia policy, whether it was his opposition to the Nord Stream 2 pipeline or...
All right, and contrast elite attitudes towards Donald Trump with elite attitudes towards Barack Obama. And the best biography of Barack Obama came out in 2017, Rising Star, The Making of Barack Obama. It's a phenomenal work. It's over 1,000 pages long. It's incredibly impressive, important work. All right, it's like Robert Caro in its exhaustiveness, says David Greenberg here, writing in Politico. The most authoritative account of Obama's pre-presidential life that we have seen or are likely to see. Is a terrific read. He interviewed over 1,000 people for the book. He talked to all sorts of people, such as ex-girlfriends who no real journalist or historian had spoken to before, such as Sheila Miyoshi Yeager, now a professor at Oberlin College. Yeager was a graduate student in anthropology, just like Barack Obama's mother. When she lived with Obama in his community organizing days, he proposed marriage to her, and he continued to see her after he began dating Michelle. And David Garrow, the historian, just unearths all sorts of interesting things about Barack Obama. Now, why isn't the book on everybody's nightstand? Right? It's 1,460 pages, but it was absolutely dismissed by reviewers. The dean of book reviewers, New York Times, Michiko Kakutani, trashed Rising Star in a lead paragraph as a dreary slog of a read, bloated, tedious, and given its highly intemperate epilogue, ill-considered. 4 days later, a caustic viral tweet by the Washington Post David Moranis, Pulitzer Prize winner, who wrote a briefer book, Barack Obama, The Story, which David Garrow's new book supersedes. Maybe this tweet by David Moranis scared off more readers. We'll say this once only. David Garrow, author of new Obama bio, was vile, undercutting, ignoble competitor unlike any I've encountered. So David Garrow jabbed and criticized many of his rivals, especially the two other Davids, David Moranis and David Remnick of the New Yorker, who authored major Obama biographies. And so he didn't play the game, right? Doris Kearns Goodwin, widely established plagiarist, she plays the game. She has tons of elite friends. And so her career just goes from strength to strength. But David Garrow doesn't play the game, right? He breaks the code. He criticizes other members of his elite. And Obama's ex-girlfriend Yeager tells David Garrow she's glad to hear from a first-rate historian, Garrow, instead of a journalist. Garrow bemoans that scores of journalists looked into Obama's high school years, and yet no more than 2 would take the trouble to even telephone, never mind visit, the only other black male student at the academy Obama attended. And he makes a lot of digs at his competitors and makes a lot of swipes at Obama, and there's something of a gotcha tone where he exposes Dreams of My Father by Barack Obama as essentially historical fiction. Because David Garrow is a historian, he's trying to get to the real Barack Obama, to peel away the layers of mythology, the self-mythologizing of Barack Obama that's pretty much been accepted by the rest of the news media. Right? The public image of who he is not who he is, says Barack Obama's longest-running friend from law school. And Obama himself has put it, there's me, and then there's this character, Barack Obama. So enormous difference between Barack Obama, the public figure dominating American news media, and the real bloke. So David Samuels at Tablet Magazine interviews David Garrow. And David Garrow says, I spent 8 hours talking with Barack Obama while he was in the White House on 3 different days. We didn't record it. It's officially off the record. But some of the stuff that Barack Obama was most energized about was, to me, hilariously inconsequential. It just shows what an empty suit Barack Obama is. He insisted that he'd been really fluent in Indonesian as a 3rd grader. And he insisted that he didn't tell several other Illinois State Senate staffers that he knew Ricky Hendon could kick his butt. So it's interesting what people feel particularly sensitive about. Barack Obama wrote to one girlfriend about his fantasies regarding making love to men. This didn't get picked up much in the news. David Garrow says, when I started reading about Barack in early 2008, I read Dreams of My Father, and I thought, this is a crock. It's not history, it's all make-believe. Who knows what the real story is? Barack wants people to believe his story. For me to conclude that Dreams from My Father was historical fiction, oh God, did that infuriate him. Barack, in the winter of 2008, realized there was no way his presidency could live up to expectations. Even the biggest fanboy journalists acknowledge, under a little bit of pressure, that Barack Obama's presidency ended up being an underwhelming, disappointing presidency. In the long run, he'll be seen as a failed presidency. Number one thing about Barack Obama over the past few years is how completely he's vanished from American life. For Barack, everything has to be a success. Everything has to be a victory, not in substance, but in appearance. He has no interest in building the Democratic Party as an institution. He has no deep, meaningful policy commitments other than the need to feel and to be perceived as victorious and triumphant. Barack Obama is just as insecure as Donald Trump. Goes back to dreams being a work of fiction. For every time Barack Obama says, "Oh, I spent years reading the history of the civil rights movement," comes from someone who 98% of his reading has always been fiction, not history. He's not someone who has any loyalty. He doesn't retain people. He doesn't have history with people. Only Rob Fisher, where there's a bit of a through line because he became friends with Rob Fisher at Harvard Law School. And the historian here, David Garrow, says Rob Fisher is the brightest person I've ever met in his life. Barack Obama does not want to be friends with his equals. He doesn't want to be generally friends with high achievers. Right? He wants to be distinctly above everyone who he has in his life. Right? Rob Fisher read his second book, The Audacity of Hope, and Rob Fisher tells him it's a mess, and Barack gets angry, right? Because nobody else would dare tell Barack Obama that his book's a mess. Rob put a lot of work into Dreams of My Father, right? Rob was a substantial contributor and shaper of this quote-unquote Barack Obama book. Barack doesn't want to be close with people who are his equals, right? Rob Fisher is far smarter than Barack. None of the people who are ostensibly Barack Obama's best friends are anywhere close to his equals. So if you compare how he got elected to the Harvard Law Review presidency, all right, as an affirmative action pick, and then how he functioned as president of the Law Review and functioned as president of the United States, right? He's not terribly ideological, right? He mainly just wants to check a box. He has a distant light touch management system. He has no investment in the content of the Law Review. He doesn't write his own notes. He's not interested in producing a work of student legal scholarship. Right? He's not a serious legislator. He wasn't a serious president. He's interested in the credential of graduating from Harvard Law and from being president of the United States. He's not invested in substance. He loses interest very quickly. Barack Obama would be terrible on the U.S. Supreme Court because he's too lazy. It might go back to him being Hawaiian. Barack Obama says, "I'm fundamentally lazy, and it's because I'm from Hawaii." I've always found the Barack and Michelle Obama need to hang out with celebrities bizarre. Who they were in 2000 would have had no desire to do that. Like people in Chicago, they're not surprised that Barack Obama turned into something else. But they can't explain why Michelle Obama turned into someone else. Barack Obama once said to an acquaintance there are only two things he wants in life, a valet and an airplane. Okay, let's wash our souls in the well springs of Torah.
Amazing thing here. I mean, normally you think about working the land, mitzvah shtuyos haaretz. No, his conception is we'll own the land. So obviously we'll have to follow. It'll be our land, so we'll have to follow the mitzvah shtuyos haaretz. But we're not going to actually go out there and get our hands dirty. That's not what good Yidden do. That's for the Goyim to do. We will sit and learn Torah, and so it's just a different conception of the Messianic era. A Messianic era where we're all just going to be sitting and learning and connecting to God and the physical things that need to be done. Because it doesn't say that the food's just going to grow naturally, miraculously, but that's for the others to do it. You know, we're the princes, and those are the non-Jews will do it. So completely. And today, before the Messianic era, there's no need for that. And not only is there no need for it, we shouldn't do it, because this is for us to work the land. That's a Messianic idea. The land to be worked is a Messianic idea. And even then, we're not.
And this is part 6 of a series, Great Rabbinic Thinkers, focusing on a Russian Zionist rabbi who was prominent in the 19th century, Rabbi Samuel Mohilever.
Not going to actually be working it. So he sees this as a complete distortion of the Messianic notion of returning to the land. So really interesting, you know, this notion of the role of the non-Jews. There's a lot to say about this. I mean, I'm not joking when I say that you find people whose attitude is, you find this even in sources, things like this, that the job of the non-Jews, we're talking how many billion, 7 billion or whatever we're at, I don't know the number now. The job of the non-Jews is basically to take care of us, to make sure our life is better. The Maharal, the Golem, the fear was they had to turn the golem off because then he'd kill all the goyim, and then we're not going to have any Shabbos goy. So it's a very different, unusual, I think, from our perspective, way of looking at things. Okay, let's.
Oy vey, imagine how inconvenient it would be if we had no Shabbos goyim to do all the things for us on the Shabbat that we're forbidden from doing according to Jewish law. Now, I think some of the wiser thinkers in Judaism say you shouldn't use Shabbos Goyim to do things for you on Shabbat because it makes Judaism look stupid. But it's very convenient. That way you get to have all the pleasures of whatever it is that you need to have done without the inconvenience when you just usually pay non-Jews to do this stuff for you.
Let's continue. Incidentally, I forgot to mention here, I want to show you another picture of a Mohilever. Zionist group, and Rav Mohilever is right in the middle there of irreligious, where the Shinover says absolutely not. We cannot have irreligious go in the land of Israel. It's matame the land, and we already saw Rav Mohilever saying the opposite, and we saw the
so matame means to make impure. So when I got pulled aside by this Orthodox rabbi, I said you can't be writing on the pornography industry. He says it's tameh, it's impure.
The Yalkut Shimoni. The Yalkut Shimoni, I'll read you the Yalkut Shimoni again to refresh your memory. Yalkut Shimoni says on Echa, Halavai Yam B'nei Ami Be'eretz Yisrael Afal Pishim Tamimosa. And he quotes a pasuk that God says it would be great if only the Jews would live in Eretz Yisrael, even though they make it impure. Okay, so that would seem to be a clear proof that the irreligious should live in Eretz Yisrael. And I think today, when we look around, leaving aside the issues I'm going to speak about, just from a purely utilitarian standpoint, if you have an irreligious Jew in Chutz La'aretz, they're going to intermarry. And within 2 generations, there'll be nothing left for most of them, as we see. But
so Chutz La'aretz refers to the diaspora.
In Israel, even if they're irreligious, they're going to marry Jewish. I mean, this is a big issue when the Russians started coming out. I was in elementary school in the 70s when the first Jews were let out of the Soviet Union, and a number of them came to my elementary school. Hebrew Youth Academy of Essex County was called. Today it's called the Kushner School, but then it was called Hebrew Youth Academy. It founded in 1948.
So that's Jared Kushner's parents primarily donated millions and millions to get the school named after them.
And then it was in South Orange, New Jersey. And we started getting these Russian students. Federation obviously was paying for it. Now, why did they come to America? And by the way, they only lasted a couple of years. And next thing, I didn't have any in high school. And I didn't have any really in 7th or 8th grade. It was only they came for a year or two. And next thing you know, they were out and they were in public school. There was a big dispute between Israel and the federations. These Jews would come out, they'd go to Vienna. That was like the big stopping place. There were some others. The standpoint of the state of Israel was that all these Jews should come to Israel. That but the federations in America said that we can't tell people where to go. They'll have the option. And many people were saying, wait a second, we're not telling them where to go, but we don't have to provide them with money. If it's our money that's doing it, why should we bring them to America? And the claim was made that, you're going to take Russian Jews, if they want to come to America, fine. But for us to put up the money to bring them to America, these are very secular people, these Russians. The majority of them are just going to assimilate. And they can do that if they want, but American Jewish money doesn't need to enable assimilation. The only place that, the whole point is they were persecuted for being Jewish. In Russia, the only place really they can remain Jewish, realistically, is in the state of Israel. So this was an argument, and the position was in the end that if they want to come to America, they'll be helped to come to America. You can argue about it now. We're talking 2 generations later.
All right, we've got a vibe shift in the culture. One example of this is Disney removed a character's transgendered theme storyline from an upcoming animated series for kids. All right, this is National Review. Come on,
Disney
man.
removes transgender storyline from upcoming children's show, National Review. Disney removed a character's transgender-themed storyline from an upcoming animated series out of deference to parents who prefer to address such a subject within the family. The character's voice actor, who self-identifies as transgender, expressed being disheartened by Disney's decision, although some see the decision as marking a welcome cultural shift and a change in corporate conduct. The Pixar animated series Win or Lose follows a middle school softball team preparing for a championship game. The series is set to premiere on Disney Plus in February 2025. Initially, the show featured a character who identified as transgender, although Disney has now removed references to the character's gender identity. When it comes to animated content for a younger audience, we recognize that many parents would prefer to discuss certain subjects with their children on their own terms and timeline, a Disney spokesperson told The Hollywood Reporter. An unnamed source told The Hollywood Reporter that decisions to change the character were made months ago. Disney's
Okay, and then there are some negative sides in the culture, such as the Lily Phillips gangbang. All right, I slept with 100 men in one day. It's a YouTube documentary starring OnlyFans creator Lily Phillips.
The Lily Phillips Tragedy, National Review. Lily Phillips is a 23-year-old OnlyFans creator who had sex with 100 men in 24 hours. Documentarian Josh Peters filmed the aftermath of and lead up to the event in a short, safe-for-work film titled I Slept with 100 Men in One Day that has since gone viral. One scene in particular has hundreds of millions of views. It shows Phillips' tearful reaction after finishing the challenge, as she says, "I don't know if I'd recommend it." Phillips eagerly described the event as a sexual fantasy of her own before she attempted the challenge. She then appeared broken and vulnerable, shaking with bloodshot eyes, at the end of the film. Many online have taken this scene to mean that Phillips regrets her actions. The documentary tells a different story. She cries because she is fatigued, she says. The only thing she regrets about the challenge is that not every man was given his promised 5 minutes with her, because of logistics errors that screwed up the day's timing, she told TMZ.
All right, the philosophical upshot on this story is something that I remarked about last Friday, but Helen Lewis picks up on the same theme today in The Atlantic. How, in a more liberal, less religious world, do we know where the lines are, where to go, and where to stop? So liberalism might be pretty good for government, but it is not a good guide for the individual's life. There's no objective, transcendent moral system to guide your life in liberalism. Instead, it's a la carte. You just choose your own way. There's nothing inherent in liberalism, in modern secular humanism, in Enlightenment thinking that shows that this Lily Phillips gangbang is just clearly wrong. Right? You need, even if you embrace liberalism, you need liberalism plus. You need liberalism plus nationalism, liberalism plus religion, liberalism plus the tribe, liberalism plus family tradition. You need something to guide you through life, so you don't go off unmoored. Okay, has the Republican Party been hollowed out? This is Brian McClanahan, PhD in history. Yes, it has. Both the major parties in the United States have been hollowed out. But is that a good thing or a bad thing? Right, it's not so clear, but you can certainly make a strong populist case that this is a good thing.
Here, we've got to try to capture these people, these working class, blue collar people that are disaffected. They don't really know what's going on. They think that the game is all rigged, and it is. So maybe we need to try to figure out how to capture these voters and do something about this. Well, Nixon wins in a landslide in 72. I think Wallace would have given Nixon some trouble had he not been shot. And then we get, the 76 election, which, of course, you've got Gerald.
So we've consistently been voting for outsiders most of the time in American presidential elections. And it's easy comparatively easy to run and win as an outsider, but very difficult to govern as an outsider.
Ford as the nominee, the most vanilla Republican you can think of, against Jimmy Carter, who positioned himself, much like George Wallace, an outsider, right? A populist kind of outsider. What does Ronald Reagan do in 1980? Well, he positions himself as a populist outsider. And then what happens? Reagan wins in 1980. And the people that really helped Reagan build that, this kind of populist outsider image, are pushed aside. They're pushed aside. And what happens? The West Coast Straussians, the Straussians in general, the neoconservatives, all funnel into the Reagan administration because they're all seeking power. These are the same people that were around in the 70s during the Ford administration. They all funnel into the Reagan administration. They all get positions in think tanks, and this is the growth of think tanks in Washington, D.C. And they essentially ostracize.
It's impossible to build anything without organization, right? You can't build a political movement without think tanks, without opportunities to help intellectuals feel important and to make a living. It verges on the impossible to earn your living purely through intellectual labor, right? Unless someone's going to subsidize you. So if you want to transform the world along the lines of your religious ideals, right, you have to join an organized religion, right? Religions organize, get things done. People who care about politics or culture or literature or art, they organize to get things done. There's no way to get things done without organizing.
The people who would have kept Reagan on a path that would have been what American conservatives really wanted out of the Republican Party. Then we get George H.W. Bush, and you have Pat Buchanan signaling in both 88 and 92 that Bush is a wolf in sheep's clothing, and he was. George W. Bush is the exact kind of person that people like Trump are hollowing out. This is what Bowie is worried about. We're not going to have all these useful idiots in the Republican Party anymore. The Mitt Romneys and the John McCains, the really good establishment people that know about government and governing because they do what we want them to do. You see, this is what Bowie is worried about. Now, I'm not saying...
Talking about Jamel Bowie, New York Times columnist.
Trump hasn't abandoned all these people, and Bowie even admits that. And some of the picks that he has are actually absolutely hilarious because it shows you what he thinks about these offices. There's more to this than just Trump looking at people on TV and saying, I need to put them in a position. You're putting clown people. Now, Trump probably doesn't think these are clowns. Some of these people are his friends, but you're putting real clown people in charge of departments that really don't need anybody in charge of them anyways because we don't need them, which is funny, right? So that's part of the hilarity of this all. So then you get, of course, H.W. Bush, you got the Buchanan challenge, and then think about it, Ross Perot in 92, Buchanan in 92. We have this very Wallace-esque, these parties are all the same, they don't really mean anything, and Bill Clinton captures the kind of populist outsider position in 92. Of course, he becomes the consummate insider at that point. They run the Democratic Party for years until Hillary Clinton is unceremoniously booted in 2008. But regardless, this is what happens. So we've got the challenge, 92. The challenge in 96 with Ross Perot. A lot of people there's not a dime's worth of difference between the Democrats and Republicans, 92 and 96. 2000 comes around, you've got Pat Buchanan running as the Reform Party candidate. And you had the Republicans have some success in the 90s. And they're running on positions that would have been in line with what Republicans or anyone, when I say Republicans, I'm talking about the people that would have voted for a Reagan agenda in 80 or a Wallace agenda in 68 or 72. This is the kind of things they're talking about. They've tried to capture that blue-collar American again. And then they all become establishment again in George W. Bush. And Barack Obama positions himself as an outsider. Here he comes again, right? Here's Obama. So really what you've seen since 1968 is Americans searching for the anti-party. Who is the person that's the most anti-party? Who did the Republicans run in 08 and 2012? The most establishment people you could think of. John McCain and Mitt Romney. Neither one of those guys is an outsider. Americans, whether they know it or not, it's just fundamentally baked in. We want somebody that's not really an insider in the presidency. Now, Joe Biden wins in 2020, supposedly, he is the consummate insider. I think people realize this guy is a complete waste. Kamala Harris, same thing. She's an insider. She's not an outsider. She's an insider, and she's a power-hungry insider at that. So all of this hand-wringing about Donald Trump, oh my gosh, he's just in it for Trump, blah, 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 blah. Americans have decided for about 50 years now, over 50 years, that they want the outsider. This is what they want. Now, of course, 68, you get Richard Nixon, who was an insider, but he starts running on a campaign that sounds like an outsider. He's adopting, and Wallace has a pretty strong showing in 68. Americans have decided this is something, conservatives in particular, this is something they want. They want an outsider. And I think some people, even though Obama was completely identity politics, there were some people voting for Obama, I do believe. I thought he's an outsider and get in there and try to fix some things, make some things work. He's going to shake some things up. They were tired of the Clintons. Obama was the outsider, you see. So when Bowie goes on about these cabinet picks and they're outsiders and they're not really government people, we have to reevaluate the Republican Party. If the GOP is hollowed out, that's a good thing. If we get rid of the Mitt Romneys and John McCain's and Liz Cheney's and all of these establishment people, that's a good thing. They could have their own kind of pro-government centrist party. In fact, that's really what the United States needs. It needs more than just two political parties. But the single-member district plurality voting, the winner-take-all system, does not lend to that. Because you're going to have this opinion, well, like in 92, Ross Perot ran and we got Bill Clinton. Ross Perot wasn't necessarily pulling votes only away from George H.W. Bush. There's been studies on this. He also pulled votes away from Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton, remember, never got 50% of the popular vote. There were people voting for Ross Perot who didn't want the insiders, you see? And Perot probably would have won in 92 had he not pulled out of the campaign. That's the thing that people forget. Perot was winning. He would have won. He would have beat both Bush and Clinton, and we would have had President Perot. Now, what's really funny, back in the 1970s, there was a book written about Ross Perot. Perot's in it, by Kirkpatrick Sale. Now, I love Kirk Sale. He's a great, he's really interested in secession and decentralization, and he's a leftist, though, and he wrote this book about Perot, warning people about Ross Perot. This is in the 1970s. And he thought Perot was going to be dangerous. So that's really funny, about 20 years later, here's Perot running for president. So let me get into this piece. Again, the title is Trump's Cabinet Picks Show That the GOP is Hollowed Out Too. Bowie says, in our candidate-centric political system, every president is a singular figure in his own way, whose appeal to the public is at least a little distinct from that of his party. But presidents still have a relationship to that party, and their choice of cabinet members and other high-level officials can tell any close observer a good deal about the nature of that relationship. I don't disagree with this, and what people think about their party itself. Again, I think this is very clear. Look, you know what Joe Biden's relationship with the Democratic Party was? I'm just going to go with whatever Barack wants. Joe Biden's cabinet picks show that Barack Obama ran the party. Joe Biden was there as a figurehead, a placeholder, somebody that Obama could control. This is what it was all about. And Kamala Harris would have been the exact same kind of person. So in some ways, by knocking out Kamala Harris, you knock out Barack Obama. This is more than the standard observation that personnel is policy. To see who gets what job is to get a better sense of the coalition that put the president into office. The president who puts a strong rival in a key position, as Abraham Lincoln did when he made William Seward Secretary of State, might be working to keep a divided party together and a potential critic within the fold of the administration. This is often brought up, the team of rivals. Doris Kearns Goodwin copied it from somebody else. But anyways, or probably not this book, but she did plagiarize a lot of other things and had to apologize for it. So this is the team of rivals. Abraham Lincoln. Look, we need to learn more from Lincoln. He put Seward in there. Seward was his opponent in every way, and Lincoln, look at this guy. Look at what Lincoln did. He put him in as Secretary of State, the next highest position in the general government, the executive branch, Secretary of State. There's some thought that if Seward had actually won the presidency, we wouldn't have had the war. Because Seward would have compromised his way out of it. Lincoln wasn't going to do it. So is Lincoln someone we should admire? Absolutely not. But that's another story. The president who taps an ideologue to lead an important agency could be showing his commitment to a set of ideas. That's what we saw, for example, when Ronald Reagan placed applied-side true believers and conservative evangelicals in key roles in his administration, cementing their influence in the Republican Party and bringing their agendas into positions of power. So it goes for Donald Trump as he announces his plans, chooses his subordinates, and moves closer to beginning his second term as president. As a candidate for president, Trump openly distanced himself from the mainstream of the Republican Party. He disavowed the party's position on abortion, despite appointing the judges who helped overturn Roe v. Wade, and he rejected Project 2025 as unrelated to his campaign. Quote, I know nothing about Project 2025, he said over the summer on Truth Social. I have no idea who's behind it. But as president-elect, he has somewhat reversed course. He plans to return Ross Voigt, one of the architects of Project 2025, to prominence as head of the Office of Management and Budget. He has also looked to a handful of more traditional Republicans to fill a few high-profile roles. When they are inevitably confirmed, Senator Marco Rubio of Florida will be Trump's Secretary of State, and Governor Kristi Noem of South Dakota will lead his Department of Homeland Security. Representative Elise Stanifek will serve as UN ambassador, and Governor Doug Burgum of North Dakota will take Secretary of the Interior. One thing interesting about Burgum, he's the only one in the last few years who talked about federalism in the Republican Party. Now, his commitment to it, I'm sure, is tepid at best, but he's the only one that really did it. So, I mean, it's interesting there.
Okay, one of my favorite stand-up comics was Patrice O'Neal. He died a few years ago, didn't take very good care of himself. And here he is talking about when Tracy Morgan got in trouble with GLAAD, the Gay Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation. This is Patrice O'Neal going on Opie and Anthony about 10 years ago.
Suck my dick.
Done. So obviously you're getting into the Tracy Morgan thing.
I'm getting into everything. It's all connecting. That's what I was trying to say.
It's all around us.
It's all connected.
But the Tracy Morgan thing is the big one today.
Well, see, my thing with Tracy is this. I don't fall for no banana and no tailpipe. I don't listen to anybody that says it. I believe the opposite. I try to make the opposite opinion right away.
Yep.
Tracy's been that a long time. Tracy's been frivolous with his performances a long time. He say some ill shit. Not just fucking gay and shit. But here's what he's doing now. It's simple as this, man. Mm-hmm. The game we're in is like jail. You gotta be, there's no rogue, lonely gunslinger guy in Hollywood. There's no, I do it myself and nobody fucks with me.
Do it my way.
My way. It ain't none of that. You got to be affiliated. Like, if you go to prison, you can't go in there and go, hey, I'm just going to read my gun books. And
you got to be affiliated, not just in prison, but in life, right? The group strategy will consistently outcompete an individualist strategy. Some days when I don't stream is because I've had no significant face-to-face or interactions over the phone. I've had no significant, meaningful interactions that got my soul moving, got my heart moving, got my brain and my emotions moving. Without those intense prompts from close interactions with other people, I just don't have the energy or the enthusiasm or the desire or the ideas to live stream. All right, I think differently when I get to interact with other people. Face-to-face is best. I think differently when I'm out for a walk as opposed to lying down. I think differently when I'm lying down as opposed to sitting in an office chair. I think differently when I'm out in nature. I think differently when I'm experiencing the sun on my face as opposed to the wind and the rain.
You know, I'm just going to chill out. You got to join something.
Yeah.
And if you don't join something, the guy's going to find out, so who you affiliate with? Well, I'm just chilling out. I'm just hanging.
I'm my own person.
I'm going to rape you. Because you have no affiliations, my friend.
Right.
You're not down with a cartel. So what Tracy, I mean, this is conjecture, but Tracy's just paying what he owe. It's like The Godfather. The guy goes, Godfather, and he goes, well, you never even fucking say hi to me.
Yeah.
But
okay, so this is back in 2011 during a performance in Nashville, Tennessee on June 3, 2011. Tracy Morgan made remarks about homosexuals, reportedly stating that if his son were gay, his son better speak to him like a man or he'd pull out a knife and stab him. Morgan apologized, saying he'd gone too far. And Tina Fey, Morgan's boss, both in fiction and real life, said, I'm glad to hear that Tracy apologized. Right? The violent imagery of Tracy's rant was disturbing to me. I hope for his sake that his apology will be accepted as sincere by his gay and lesbian co-workers at 30 Rock, without whom Tracy would not have lines to say, clothes to wear, sets to stand on, scene partners to act with, or a printed out paycheck from accounting to put in his pocket. Everyone came down on Tracy Morgan then.
You know what? Here's my deal. I'll do what you want. And when I need you, I'm just going to come get what I need. And he goes, you hear this? Knock on the door. And it's like, you got to pay me back.
Yeah.
Tracy owes a lot of people his career. Because why do you think he could say, now trust me, people that know Tracy, he says some ill shit that he could get in trouble like he is for every day. This time around, he said something, and they said, oh, here's a good time. Tracy? Yeah, what? What's up? Yeah, you know, you're in deep shit. We're going to make you apologize, but you owe. And the fear that when you owe is that they're going to take everything from you. Mm-hmm. So if they didn't make you, they can't really break you. And you see, I say they. It's It's the cartels, man. You do not look at gay people
I know
have
exactly
a
what you're saying.
powerful cartel. I affiliate myself with Jews, low level to mid level Jews.
Okay, let's get
'Cause they
Kip back onto the show. Kip, what's going on, man?
Hey man, I appreciate you playing that piece from Patrice.
Yes.
I told you, I mean, no family members or anybody that I'd ever lost was quite the gut punch that Patrice was. Now, I'll be honest, in the last 2 or 3 years, I have thought less, what would Patrice think? Because the world is just, I don't know, gotten so queer and almost surreal at this point. I don't even know if he would recognize it, but for several weeks I was torn up, and I mean, for years afterwards, I would keep thinking, what would Patrice think? And he was one of those guys you didn't realize that you were listening to greatness until like he was gone, and there was like nobody filling that void. You look around for somebody filling the void, and for me, Norm Macdonald did somewhat, but even Norm, I could see his mind being captured by the political correctness and that sort of thing. They would shit on him, and every once in a while he would just want to do his thing. And Patrice had a sense of righteousness that kept him from going along with stuff. But Norm was growing softer in his older years, and I appreciated probably Norm when he was a little bit younger and was able to fight the fight. You know how we get a little bit weak when we get older. You know what I mean?
Well, we have more of a sense of what we can lose, and we don't have necessarily the vitality and the energy to build everything back up if we lose everything.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I got livid the other day at you, and you weren't even around, but I was just every once in a while. I mean, don't get me wrong, Luke. I appreciate having a rent-a-friend, if you will, someone that I can chew the fat with. But the hours, your little barber pole, it's hardly ever spinning. You know what I mean? And sometimes I'll check in looking for Luke. Hey, it's time for Luke. Where is he? And you've been bouncing around here lately. You've been like a bit dodging me like I was a bill collector or something. I know you're going to say, hey, I got my own life. And it's true, you do. But gosh, you got to let us think that we can, see that barber pole, I don't know. I felt like on one hand, I felt like you were dodging me, but on the other hand, I was like, well, he was just, you get used to him being there every night. And then all of a sudden he's gone for a couple of nights and you're like, I can't fault him for that. He's a human being, for Christ's sakes. You know what I mean, Luke?
Yes, sir. And I just didn't sleep well for a couple of nights. I think that was most of it. When I don't sleep well, I don't think as clearly. I don't get as excited because I just don't have as much energy. And so, yeah, all sorts of things go by the wayside when I don't sleep well.
But to us, we can get the impression that you just live in a box and you're always chipper. And we know that's not always the case. But that's what we see. That's the image that we see. And sometimes I have to remind myself that he does other things in his 168 hours a week other than the Luke Ford show. There's other things going on. But anyway, I was livid at you a couple of days ago because I was looking for you. It was time for you to be on, but you wasn't there. But there was some picture of this super good-looking, charismatic dude that was talking to Steve Croft. And
60 Minutes, yeah.
That was circa when? Tell me when that was.
2003.
Okay. Yeah, I was livid because I kept thinking about that face and talking to you about the fact that we need, somebody to carry the golden mic forward here in a couple of decades. You can't do it forever. And then I see this is what he was working with in 2003. You should have. There's no excuse for you not tricking some gal, and being married long before now. You know, some guys got horrible disfigurations and they got excuses. You got no fucking excuses. Explain yourself. Explain yourself. Otherwise, there must be some deep-seated problems that I'm previously unaware of, Luke Ford.
Well, there are deep-seated problems. So if you just look at it on a naturalistic level, I had poor health until I started taking my beef organ capsules 3 years ago, and I wasn't fully functional till I got my ADHD medication and diagnosis a year ago. So those are the two things that have helped me become, much higher functioning in life.
Okay. And you're saying that kept you down from what time frame to what time frame? Now,
until a year ago. Until a year ago.
A year ago.
Yep.
And when did this problem start?
All my life. From childhood.
And how did it manifest itself?
Well, lack of strength manifested itself in a lot of illness and just not the physical strength to do a man's work and to shoulder normal adult responsibilities. Then the ADHD manifests itself with an inability to do the things that I know I need to do because I'm can't maintain my focus. It makes you much more emotionally volatile, and you become hypersensitive to rejection, and it makes it very difficult to maintain close relationships.
Seems incongruent with the high achieving Luke Ford that writes 5 books. How am I having a hard time accepting that? You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, the 5 books aren't great books. They're okay, but they're not great. They're not as good as what I would have done if I'd gotten the ADHD under control.
Mm-hmm. Can we agree? And I sent you an email and told you that if you had been on the air the other night, I was going to let you have it, didn't I? Because I compared you, that super good-looking motherfucker that was standing there with Steve Croft. I didn't watch the interview because the thumbnail made me so mad, I was juxtaposing you to that damn Bill Maher. That fucking nose he's got and those damn, in the Marines, we called them birth control glasses because nobody was going to screw you when you were wearing those glasses. And he's got that stringy ass hair where you've been able to see his scalp for God knows how many years. Okay. He is a professional success, but a personal failure, almost more like a tragic personal failure. Would you agree with those assessments?
I don't know enough about him. He's funny in a fairly superficial way, and yeah, he hasn't built a family. So, right, he's a mildly superficially entertaining guy.
Mm-hmm. I tell you, you weren't around to defend yourself in my head, when I was mad at you after seeing that thumbnail. And the thing that kept going through my mind is, fuck it, Luke, man. This ain't the era of Leonardo DiCaprio and Hugh Hefner. You ain't gonna be able to pull that off. They could pull that off, but that era's over. Is that what you were thinking? Was it really all about the health? It had nothing to do with you were trying to maybe pull a Leo DiCaprio and you were just setting your sights too high?
Leo DiCaprio and I shared the same girlfriend in 1998. I was just trying to do the best I could with the tools that I had at the time. So I was not very strong until about 3 years ago. So just trying to find a way to make a living and something that would keep my attention.
Mm-hmm. It just, I don't know. I just felt like you had the tools to work with. There's something that ain't getting through to me that you're saying that something was very, I don't know. You were going through these disabilities, and I don't know. Me being an ex-Marine, they'd slap us around and say, improvise, adapt, and overcome. Snap out of it, basically, is what they would say. But
if they didn't eject you or fail to admit you in the first place because of health problems. So It's one thing you say that to people who have the physical strength to do the things that you need to do. Right? The people in the Marines, they have passed through a medical examination. They pass through a test, all right, and then you slap people around if they don't perform. But you don't go into a hospital filled with wounded soldiers and start slapping them around.
Right. Sad state that we live in now. That I think the last number I saw was only 23% of graduating seniors were able to pass the minimum requirements to go into any branch of the service. And some of it's physical, physical problems that they may have. Some of it's being able intellectually. There's some of it is because they've gotten in trouble. Some of it might be that they've had drug convictions or whatever. But it's just a shame to know that 77% of the eggs coming out of the high school, are cracked eggs. That's kind of a you got anything to say about the hamburger meat that's coming out of the high schools, and the fact that only 23% of them are qualified for the military? We ain't talking about Harvard here. We're talking about the military.
Yeah, that's a big problem. And it wasn't like this in the 1950s. It wasn't even like this in the 1960s. The obesity epidemic took hold in America in the 1970s and has only gotten worse since the 1970s. So something changed in the late 60s, early 70s that has been highly deleterious to American health.
Mm-hmm. No, you're absolutely right. And I don't know. I mean, when I was young, this thing, autistic, just like 1 out of every 300 people, and now it's every fourth boy coming out or something like that. So that's weird. That stuff is weird.
Well, wait, this all ties together because we've got a much more medicalized society. So things that we used to attribute to moral problems or religious problems or problems of the soul, all right, we are now much more likely to diagnose with medical names. So if you're feeling down week after week after week and just lacking energy, all right, then you may get diagnosed with depression. And then if you so there are people close to me who, like me, experience a great deal of anxiety during certain settings, and so you can have disabling levels of anxiety, and that will get another diagnosis, or you can be ADHD, or you don't assimilate B12, right? So there are millions of Americans who are weak because they don't assimilate B12, and they can suck down all the B12 tablets, but only eating meat and possibly B12 injections will really get it done for them. But there are millions of Americans who are just physically weak because they don't assimilate B12. And people who are raised with a vegetarian diet, such as myself, right, there are significant physical and cognitive problems from a vegetarian diet, not to mention social problems, right? You become isolated with a vegetarian diet because you become much more difficult to socialize with. And one of the best predictors for your health and welfare is the number of friends and the depth of friendships that you have when you're a teenager. So raising your kids vegetarian is one of the worst things that you can ever do to your kids.
Right. No, you're right about them medicalizing everything and making everything something that can be on the DSM. And that's bad. I've heard not one, but like on 3 different occasions, either young people talking about this or their parents talking about they would like to have a diagnosis because now there's more people in their class, in their peer group or whatever that have a diagnosis versus don't have a diagnosis. Boy, that's a sad state.
Well, wait. It's not necessarily sad. Some people it helps. Right? Some people are significantly improved because they got the diagnosis and they then get on the right program or the right medication. Other people are helped simply because they have a diagnosis that is able to put words to what you're feeling and what you're struggling with. If you can't name what you're fighting, what you're going through, what you're experiencing, that is just an awful experience. And that's what I had for the first year of what became known as chronic fatigue syndrome. I didn't even have a name for this chronic weakness that I was experiencing. and just getting a name for it was a big help. So a correct diagnosis is incredibly useful, or sometimes any diagnosis is useful. It gives you a way of thinking about what you're struggling with, and then other times it's not helpful. Sometimes it can be doing you more harm than good. There's nothing inherently good or bad about getting a diagnosis. Probably the most important question is the diagnosis accurate? Right? An accurate diagnosis will usually help people.
Yeah, in the Marines, if you fucked up, they had something called the UCMJ, Uniform Code of Military Justice, and they had this catch-all, Article 121, maybe it was 131. It was conduct unbecoming of a Marine. So if they couldn't find anything to bust your ass on otherwise, then they would just get you for that, the catch-all. And I see that with the medicalization that you were talking about, because they've got stuff right down to shyness. You could just be shy, and they'll be like, you know what, you are exhibiting the signs of social anxiety disorder. I mean, they got you. I mean, whatever you're feeling blue about today, they got you. They got a pill, and like you, I'm just saying, it starts people down a path, and I think in more cases than not, they probably don't have any business going down that path. But like you've talked about before, they trust that white lab coat. They trust that stethoscope around their neck. And
well, who should they trust? We have to trust someone. So I'm not saying people should automatically trust anyone, but it's inevitable that we will trust people. So sometimes the doctor is the right person to trust. Other times your pastor is the right person to trust. Other times your dad is. Other times your neighbor. But there's no category of people who it's just inherently great to trust or inherently terrible to trust. It all depends on the caliber of the particular individual.
I know you've recently accused me of misanthropy, and that's not me. I'm just saying a healthy dose of skepticism needs to be applied in most of these cases. I just remember,
and a healthy skepticism of skepticism too. You can't just uniformly apply skepticism without simultaneously applying that skepticism to your skepticism.
Right. My dad, I just know that he's had a couple of procedures that he ends up raising his hands for, and he shouldn't have had them. I know one of them was like a shoulder surgery that he was complaining of that shoulder over a year after the surgery, and was having to go do the rehab stuff. That was painful. It all was painful. He shouldn't have volunteered for that. And like a couple of years earlier, when he had his bypass surgery, they had some experimental blood thinner that they thought he would be an excellent candidate for. I mean, they gave him that shit, and he had a bad reaction. It almost took him from us. So I'm just saying, raising your hand because they say, well, maybe the procedure's free and it'll save you X, Y, or Z. It's not always a good thing. I know that
well, there's nothing that's always a good thing. There's nothing. Meditating isn't always a good thing. People sometimes have a serious schizophrenic personality breakdown from meditating. You can drink too much water. You can spend too much time in religion. You can study too much philosophy. You can work too hard. You can exercise too much. You can spend too much time with your mother. You can spend too much time with your brother. There's nothing that's always good.
You're right. My sister, she had a fiance, and they were like, I think it was around Raleigh, North Carolina is where it was. And he got bit by a spider, and he goes into the doctor to get it taken care of. And I don't know, he lived just far enough out of town where it was some like smaller hospital or whatever. And don't you know, they gave him, like, instead of like one dose, they gave him like 500 doses or 100 doses, or it killed him. You get what I'm saying? The treatment actually killed him from the spider bite. And I mean, boy, that sucks.
So every doctor will kill at least 10 people in the course of a career. So medical mistakes kill a huge number of people. Yet overall, doctors do more harm than good. I'm thinking about a woman who hosted me often for the Jewish Sabbath and for Jewish holiday meals. And she had a serious medical problem that she refused to get proper medical care for because she thought she could just cure it by eating natural foods. And she died completely unnecessarily. Steve Jobs, he died years earlier than he needed to. He died because he thought he could deal with his health problems by just eating fruit.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say that I don't know. I was looking at something. I was looking at list of podcasts that people liked. I had put like in a search group favorite podcast or something, and some person had they had your show on their list of like 7 or 8 podcasts, and then they had listed beside. They had put in parentheses, I guess like the themes or whatever for each podcast, and the theme for yours was Jewish alt-right and deviance. What the what the hell? Over explain yourself, Luke Ford.
Well, a focus of the show during the rise of the alt-right was the alt-right and the interaction between Jews and the alt-right. And so we would have members of the alt-right and members of the Jewish community talking to each other. And that's what was one of the things that was distinctive about the show, say from 2016 to 2019.
So that characterization doesn't really hit you the wrong way. It's just I'm not with the times. That the times were different back then is what you're saying.
Correct. That was a pretty fair summary for the shows 2016 to 2019.
Okay. I did go back and listen to your I guess it was called John David Ebert autobiography, and I could just say that I don't know, I felt dirty and sort of needed a shower afterwards. So I thought, is that what they're talking about? But no, they're probably talking about what you're saying. What you're saying that
well,
was just
a major focus of this show is the uncomfortable things that people don't like to talk about. So deviance is one of them, but I'm generally comfortable talking about things that most people find uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. Can I say one or two things about Rony, the guy Ronnie? Do you say Ronnie or Rony?
Rony. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. He seemed awfully timid to me. Once there, you was asking him to like look up or whatever, and I know some people. I thought about myself. I thought about how when you and I are talking, my IQ is lower, than when I'm writing. And I just was like, well, just because Ronnie appears to be timid and shy in this interview, that doesn't mean that his writing is going to be timid and shy. There's a reason Luke Ford had him on this show, So that because my ideal philosopher is probably Friedrich Nietzsche, and like I told you before, he's the guy that says philosophy, as I so far understood and lived it, means living voluntarily among ice and high mountains, seeking out everything strange and questionable in existence, everything so far placed under a ban by morality. He says the ice is near, the solitude tremendous, but how serenely all things lie in the light, how freely one breathes lies beneath oneself. And I just wonder, I don't know, I didn't really hear Ronnie talk about like trying to navigate whether he was, maybe he might not feel like philosophy is all about that. He might feel like philosophy is something else, but I know you introduced him as a philosopher.
He has a PhD in philosophy. He published an academic book on philosophy. He also graduated from law school. Most writers are not smooth public speakers, right? Most writers are incredibly awkward speakers.
Mm-hmm. You said he's a lawyer also?
Yeah, he's an attorney and a philosopher, and he's done some deep, difficult, innovative philosophical work. but he's not a smooth talker like Megyn Kelly, right? He's a deep thinker.
I get what you're saying, but I noticed some liberal reframes kept creeping into his thought.
Oh, he's not a conservative. He's probably left of center.
Mm-hmm. Did it sound like, from in the time that you've talked to him, did it sound like he had a hard time navigating academia? That didn't work for him?
Correct. It didn't work for him because he wasn't willing to play the game. So just like Patrice O'Neal wasn't willing to play the game, and I wasn't willing to play the game, and Rony Guldmann wasn't willing to play the game and to pay obeisance to the powers that be, then you don't tend to have success, right? Your success is quite limited when you're not willing to play the game. Rony Guldmann was on a path to a brilliant, sparkling career as a law professor, but he was unwilling to pay obeisance to the powers that be. He insisted on an independent path, and therefore he cut himself off from the possibility of a thriving academic career.
Mm-hmm. So that surprises me that you say he wasn't able to really navigate the academia side, because when I hear him, it sounds like his thinking all goes through like the liberal scaffolding, that the academia is all about. But you're saying he couldn't even keep it clean enough for them. Is that what you're saying? He
chose not to bow down to the powers that be in academia and insisted on following his own path. And even though he was left of center, right, even people left of center will sometimes refuse to play the game, and that will cost them the opportunity for professional glory.
Mm-hmm. 10-4. Okay. So I was expecting too much. I shouldn't have gotten too sideways when I heard him poo-poo Biden down to mental was it disorganization or disorientated?
I asked him I asked him whether the plain speaking of conservatives who just noted that Joe Biden much of the time seems senile, was that not a more accurate perception of Joe Biden than the more elevated and complicated speech of the highly educated who refused to use terms such as senile? And so it was a more intricate discussion from Rony saying it's not clear necessarily that the plain spoken description of Biden as senile is necessarily more accurate than a more complicated description of Biden being cognitively in decline. So he wouldn't say that being plain spoken is necessarily more truthful than the more complicated speech of the elite.
Right. I was trying to follow his line of logic, and some of that stuff I was unfamiliar with. He was saying that Trump was saying the FBI tried to assassinate him, and Trump advised putting bleach in your veins to fight COVID. And then he said something along the lines of, given that Donald Trump had been given a pass for that the media and everybody else sought to level the playing field. That was the logic. And I was like, was Trump really running around telling everybody to put bleach in their vein? Was he really advising that? I don't think he was. Do you look for it?
It's clear that Donald Trump says more crazy things than any other president of which I'm aware. So the specifics of what exactly Donald Trump said about bleach and curing COVID is less important than the overall fact that Donald Trump says a lot of things that break the norms of what we expect from presidential behavior.
It breaks his opponent's minds in the process too. Have you noticed that? His realm of thinking is so far out of what they think is the legitimate bounds, but they bring that upon themselves. You pointed that if Obama doesn't run his mouth in 2014 at that press thing and start flapping about Donald Trump isn't going to be this and isn't going to be that, we wouldn't have a 2-term Donald Trump president. I don't think. Do you?
Possibly, but Donald Trump has this thing where he says something outrageous, and then the reaction to him is even more outrageous than the outrageous thing that he says. So he has a gift for triggering people into insane levels of hatred, which then make them less effective. So normally you'll be more effective in life the more clarity you have, and you'll have more clarity if you don't take things personally. On the other hand, taking things personally is a tremendous source of energy for a lot of successful people such as Elon Musk and Donald Trump.
Okay. Yeah. You know that he's just got ABC News for 16 million, 15 in the verdict plus $1 million in legal fees. Trump did, right?
Yep.
And now he's going after Des Moines Register. Is that what he's going after now?
Yes.
How did they run afoul? I'm sorry, because I was looking for your time to be upcoming, and I flip you on. You've already been on for an hour and a half, so I may have missed some stuff that you've already spoke to this. But how did Miss Seltzer and the Des Moines Register run afoul, Luke?
Well, just before the election, she posted a poll showing Kamala Harris ahead in Iowa, which was surprising because most other polls had Donald Trump way ahead. So I think Donald Trump ended up winning Iowa by 12. She had him down by something like 4 percentage points. And there is a particular law in Iowa against misrepresentation in commercial advertising. So I don't fully have a handle on the legal theory of the case. I don't believe that Donald Trump has any chance in hell of winning this lawsuit against the Des Moines Register. I think it is a terrible idea. It's really stupid. This is petty Trump. I don't think he should be trying to sue Liz Cheney, and I think he should be trying to bring any more attention to the disaster that was January 6th. But people have good points and bad points, and if you want the good things, right, you have to be willing to accept the bad things. And there is a tremendous amount of pettiness and poor judgment with Donald Trump, and we have to take the bad with the good.
Now, I might be unaware of something that might already be going on, but you being in Hollywood, I think there might be a Luke Ford opportunity, because I truly believe that a lot of that Hollywood glitzy stuff, those Grammys and Academy Awards and all that stuff, I think they're fading away, as everybody realizes how phony all those people are. But what seems to be replacing them is something like YouTube. What would be, don't you think YouTube and the internet has been a thing long enough where there should be, is it Grammys? Is it Academy Award? What would be the equivalent that Luke Ford could organize out there in Hollywood, since that's what's replacing that dying industry?
Well, people who succeed in an industry are industry people, people who are willing to play by the games of the industry. People who succeed in podcasting and on YouTube are not industry people by and large. They are independent, and so trying to corral them would be like trying to herd cats.
Yeah, but you've seen those events when they have cosplays and something like that. There's a lot of people that'll play big money just to get dressed up and go to stuff. And you would think with all the podcasts and YouTube and now Joe Rogan and some of these people are a big thing. I just think Luke Ford and his pearly whites, you could be passing out awards. Is there anything like that already? Or is this something that I'll have to
there are things like it, but my mind just kind of goes blank when it comes to awards. So I don't pay much attention.
When you were talking to, every once in a while, you shit on the COVID people like me that didn't get our vaccines. And I just wanted to ask you about your home country. The way they shit on Djokovic, what was your thoughts on that? What the hell was that man supposed to do? He had already had COVID. He had already built up his immunity. He had already done tests that he didn't have it. What the hell? Why wouldn't they let him come in that country? What are they so afraid of, Luke Ford?
Well, they were afraid of getting death rates similar to the death rates in the United States. So in 2020, Australia had about 1/40th the per capita death rate of the United States. I'd say that's something to be proud of. So for Australians, they thought it was unfair to expose vulnerable people unnecessarily to COVID. And so as a society, as a nation, they banded together, they overwhelmingly obeyed the rules, and they were able to have a COVID death rate that was 1/40th approximately of what the COVID death rate was in the United States. I think that's something quite praiseworthy. Now, after they abandoned social distancing policies and most people got vaccinated, then the COVID death rate became much more similar to the United States from 2021 onward. But for 9 months there, at about 1/40th the death rate of the US. To me, that's a fantastic thing. America lost about an average of 2 years life expectancy just in the first year of COVID. I don't think that's a great thing. The average number of years lost of life per COVID death has been estimated in various academic studies at between 10 and 16 years. So it usually wasn't people in the last few months of life who were then just kicking the bucket. And so 2,000 people under 18 died of COVID in the United States. So I think, generally speaking, most of the COVID protocols by the powers that be were more right than wrong, and that overall we should have gratitude for the people who are operating our country during a very difficult time. And the cranks who were defying social distancing and defying vaccines just have been proved definitively wrong again and again and again.
I'll tell you why you're wrong.
Okay, let me. Oh wait, I just want to finish off on Djokovic. So Australia had a standard, and so just because you catch COVID, that doesn't give you immunity for years to come. Right? It gives you boosted immunity for a few weeks, and then a little bit of immunity for a few weeks after that, and then after a few months, all right, you're about as susceptible to COVID as the next bloke. And same with getting vaccinated, right? Getting vaccinated gives you a significant boost for a few weeks, gives you a moderate boost for another few weeks, gives you a mild boost for a few more weeks, and then after that, the benefits of the COVID vaccine are pretty attenuated. Okay, back to you.
I'll tell you why you and the U.S. government were dead wrong. In the end result, who got killed with COVID? It was the people who had several what they called comorbidities. You remember?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of them, most of them did have comorbidities. So their life doesn't matter?
No. My government, the U.S. government, chose to deny my father and my mother, old people, COVID vaccines for the first round because they wanted to give it first to what they called first responders. And their rationale for this was because there was too many white people in the old folks category, but the numbers looked better. The demographics for diversity looked better in the first responders category. Ergo, that was the rationale they gave.
Oh, so you say the government did that when in reality, one or two bureaucrats came up with this and it received a pretty stern reaction. So the government, right? We have many layers of government. We have state, we have federal, we have local, we have cities, we have all sorts of government agencies. So you take one or two things that this government bureaucracy tried out, and then you just tar the entire government with something that some bureaucrats decided on.
Mm-hmm. On a lighter note, where I grew up, they had like rap battles. What's the podcast equivalent to a rap battle? Do you just start beating each other with your microphones, or?
That's internet blood sports. So look up internet blood sports. That's where people go long and go hard.
I just feel like somewhere in time, one podcaster has stepped over the line, and ergo something like a rap battle has ensued. But so what'd you say? Internet blood sports. I need to check out something.
Internet blood sports. Yep, look that up.
Okay. And then I was gonna say, I wonder how good that first pizza was. That $1.75 billion pizza, when the guy spent 17,500 Bitcoin for those two pizzas. What would that have been, like 2011, 2012? And now those Bitcoin, those pizzas are worth like $875 million a piece. Do you think?
Right, and tomorrow they could be worth nothing. There's no inherent value to Bitcoin. So today it's $100,000 and tomorrow it could be nothing because there's nothing inherently valuable about it.
There, I tell you, because I'm with you, there's really no there, Luke.
Yep.
Strangely enough, it had a use case back when that Silk Road was open. I knew people that were using it when that Silk Road was open, but to my knowledge, you don't see people using their Bitcoin to buy food at Whole Foods. I can't think of. I can think of a lot of people who had Bitcoin and just lost that string of characters. I wonder how many people. What happens to the lost Bitcoin in the little thing? If they're like recycled, or if they just sit around to the end of time, being lost. It's a crazy thing, but you see it go up so high. The young people, I think it's a that's how little faith they have in the system. I think that's why young people pile into that. I think they have such little faith in our system. You got anything to say about that? You agree, disagree?
Yeah, it's a way to feel like you're transcending the financial system and you're in on the hot new thing and you buy into the hype. And there's a community, right? You get to join a community when you're a Bitcoin enthusiast. Now, I think these type of currencies are a scam and that there's no validity to them, but they probably provide some excitement and sense of community and a sense of superiority that many people find intoxicating.
And what that guy, Yuri Guri or whatever that we were talking about the other day, he said between 2000 and 2001, information doubled. That Bitcoin came out in 2011. How many doublings have we had since 2011? How many more ways to smarter, efficiently write that code? All you have to do is one group of eggheads come together, put together a white paper and say, we've got it, Bitcoin 2.0. And that shit goes right down the trash. You get what I'm saying, Luke? What made it special can be what kills it, because that, as sweet of an idea as it could have been in 2011 or whenever it was, Sakamoto or whoever his name was, somebody can improve. Some egghead out there can probably already improve upon that right now. Don't you agree, Luke Ford?
Bitcoin doesn't make, cyber currencies in general, Bitcoin in particular, doesn't make any sense to me. It fulfills no genuine need. People would be better off putting their money in other things. So it's like discussing the various chemical compositions of different sewer systems. It's all a sewer system from my perspective.
You and I have the unique perspective of kind of being around in the very early 80s when these things called computer rooms first started showing up in high schools and middle schools. Can you remember seeing those room full of blinking cursors in the early 80s for the first time?
Yes, I think it was about 1980 that I first played a computer game with the modem.
And they were all like Commodore 64s or TI 99 4As. There was only like 3 or 4 machines that were being mass produced at the time. But I remember thinking, Luke Ford, those blinking cursors represented that everybody from here on out was going to be Einsteins. You get what I'm saying, Luke? The end of, I just, for some reason, as a kid, I thought it was just going to be so transformative. And I'll tell you why that was stupid, because my dad had been working on mainframes, those things with the miles of wires underneath the floor, and you got to have cooling systems, climate controlling the rooms that they're in, and all this kinds of stuff. He was working on those, so I had already seen what. And my dad and all his guys, them with those black rim glasses, and they got pocket protectors and white short sleeve shirts, and the pocket protectors are just jammed with pins. What were they doing with the machines? What were they doing? They were fucking sitting around playing stuff like Leisure Suit Larry, and they were what you might want to call first generation smut, first generation porn. That's what they themselves were doing, Luke Ford. You get what I'm saying? How stupid was I thinking we were going to be a bunch of Einsteins when I didn't put two and two together, and I could see that the damn computers were already rotting the brain of my dad's generation. Can you speak to that for me?
Well, I don't think it's the computers that are rotting the brain, and it's just part of being human to get overly enthused and think that we're living in a new era when opportunities for those types of flights of fancy come along. So there are ways that computers have transformed our lives, and there are ways that computers and having a computer on your phone in your pocket have been devastating for some people, greatly advantageous for others, a wash for some. Now, your dad and his friends weren't just messing around with porn. They were also doing a lot of valuable work that was much more effective and efficient done on a mainframe computer than whatever technology they were using prior to that. So the first email was sent around 1967. A computer scientist had come back from a conference, and I think he may have even sent the first email from UCLA to a computer in England, if I recall correctly, saying that he'd left his hat behind. And so I find the history of the internet absolutely fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just the possibilities. Here I am thinking in one realm of possibilities, and we always just the lowest form of new human nature seems to win out. You get what I'm saying?
Well, it's not just the lowest form, but why would you expect the lowest form to not show up? So people use computers for the most elevated and the lowest, and often they're the same people, right? You have a base side to you. I have a shadow side to me. Everybody's got a darkness and a shadow side, and a lazy and a lustful side. And we also have the potential for heroism. So why would we expect what people do on computers to be exempt from the normal human condition, which varies from the heroic to the disgusting?
I just hate that our tendency is always to go low. It's, you know what I'm saying? I'm never surprised. The
tendency is to go low when you can get away with it, right? If you can cheat at work, people will cheat at work. If you can cheat on your taxes, get away with it, people will cheat on their taxes. So when they started opening up clubs and performing sex scenes in Los Angeles, they just became raunchier and raunchier and turned into bestiality shows. And so when Marilyn Chambers, she started out after she released a couple of porn movies in the early 70s, she came back to a strip club in San Francisco, and she was performing on stage, and then she started having various sexual interactions with patrons, and it just progressed and progressed until the police cracked down. So people will tend to pursue the easiest alternatives until they receive pretty stiff punishments, which perhaps will incentivize them to get back on the straight and narrow. People will stay on the straight and narrow until they feel like their needs are better met by going into the gutter. So why does someone walk on the straight and narrow path for 12 years and then choose one evening to go into the gutter? Because his experience of going into the gutter meets his needs more effectively than walking on the straight and narrow path. And so there's no recovery from the gutter until you come to terms with what are your needs that are not getting met walking on the straight and narrow path.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I was going to ask you about my daughter. I don't think I've ever asked you about this. I got a couple of daughters. One of them's, the younger one's already married and living up in the D.C. area to a military man. And then the other one, though, she said she's got a psychology degree. You know, I was so interested in her rushing off 2-3 years ago and get started. Get your name in the hat, get in on the ground level somewhere. You got to do that. And she was happy and has been happy just managing the skating rink. And I don't know, to me, she's smarter than that. She's always been smart, and I wanted her to really get in there and do something with that. But as long as she's happy, just managing the skating rink, should I lose sleep over that?
No, for among other reasons, there's nothing you can do. So this is her journey, and it may be the the best thing for her. So people are complicated and situations are complicated. So you don't know how this job makes her happy or how it fulfills her, or maybe you do. But yeah, people are complicated, and some people are better off in a low stress job like managing a skating rink rather than in a higher paying job. On the other hand, if it's a dysfunction, and it's a dysfunction if it's crippling her life, then that's a serious matter, and I would assume she'd be unlikely to listen to any advice from you. But eventually the pain of the dysfunction will become so intense that doing something different will be less painful than continuing on with the dysfunction. So if she's a chronic under-earner, if she's addicted to essentially living life in some type of cave where she is shielded from normal adult responsibility, at a certain point, that will just become so painful that she feels she has no choice but to leave that cave and to do something different.
Yeah, well, what she's, I don't expect you to know the skating rink environment, but it's chronic 17, 18-year-old. They age out of it. You get what I'm saying, Luke? They age out of it at 17, 18, 19. So, she turned 20, she turned 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. Guess how old her crop of friends still are, Luke Ford?
17 and 18?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sorry, I was letting the cat in. So, from a father's perspective, that's the only thing I worry about psychologically. There is a part of me, my father has said that I shouldn't worry about it, that she happily goes to work. She's always to work early, never has any complaints about work, that comparing her to her peer group, most of her peer group probably don't even have a job, So he said, you can't really judge her by the standards you or I lived. It's probably better to judge her by her own peer group standards. And by their standards, both your kids have had a job ever since they were 16. Don't worry about it. So what do you think? Is that the right attitude?
Well, you can't help but worry about it, and you can't help but judge. The important thing is how you communicate it to her, or if you just even keep silent. I mean, but you don't get to graduate from judging. We will judge until we die. And if you have anyone that you care about, you can't help but worry about them when you feel like they're going down a bad path. So there's no way to get away from worrying, and there's no way to get away from judging. That's just inherent. There are plenty of reasons why you should be concerned about this direction, but there's probably not much you can do about it. It's probably not the ideal thing that most parent dreams of for their college-educated daughter, but it's her journey. I'm sure she's got a lot of concerns about how you live your life.
Probably so. I know there's going to come a time where one day they'll have to go through all the manuscripts of their father, and they're going to be, my God, that man's brain was tortured. He was tortured. So in the end result, they'll probably feel sorry for me. But anyway, I was going to say, Jung spoke on how a man derives his meaning, and, Jung was a complicated guy. He was the kind of guy that had Emma Jung, his wife, but he also had Wolf. I believe her name might have been Tracy Wolf. That was his girlfriend. And the strangest part was the girlfriend and the wife both got along. You don't see that every day, do you, Luke Ford?
Are you talking about Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
He must have been laying some pipe or something to keep them both happy. You just these are different times, though. Maybe there's something to be said about the different times that we live in versus that era that he lived in. But if a man lives his life symbolically, religiously, in the broadest sense of the word, it's as if the Great Spirit or God had passed over not only his powers, but also his responsibilities to that human, creating a godlike task to perform here in creation. To the extent which he performed that task, that was where meaning itself was derived. What do you think about that?
Well, when you're a star, you can get away with these things, all right? When you're a star, right, and a woman is deeply attracted to you, a lot of women would rather have a part of a guy who's a star than the whole enchilada of someone who just works as an elementary school teacher. So that's just what I was thinking about. Carl Jung was a star, and he's probably just was automatically attracted to beautiful women. He'd just start kissing them. His fame was like a magnet. He'd just kiss. He wouldn't even wait. And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything. Grab her by the pussy.
It always goes back to deviance, bro, doesn't it? You know,
that's not deviant. If it's and again, this is not Donald Trump talking about sexually assaulting random women. He's talking about women who are highly sexually attracted to him, and he just gets it going. All right, grabbing a woman by the pussy, and that woman is deeply sexually attracted to you. That's not assault, right? That's doing a kindness.
Yes, sir. Was it Rony or who was it you were rapping about fat acceptance a few days ago, maybe a week ago?
Yeah, it was based on an essay by Ronnie Guldmann.
Oh, okay. I was just going to make a comment before leaving you here that I had only met one from 1986 to 1990. I had only met one fat person in the Marines, you know, and he was a gunnery sergeant who happened to have a real affinity for Coca-Cola. He had 2 liters of Coca-Cola a day, and it made him just as round as you would think. And the Marines didn't cut him any kind of slack. He basically had to be on what you would call extra duties because he was never able to get below the weight line, you know, whatever whatever the line is for his height, you know. So he was always, instead of seeing a different staff sergeant working the barracks after hours, it would always be him. You get what I'm saying? Because he could never. So he paid a price every fucking week for his love for Coca-Cola and couldn't shake it. So that tells me that was in his mind, man. But I was going to say, even the muscular weightlifters, the one that would look like a Lou Ferrigno type, they also too, they were the other ones with him that would get stuck with extra duty because they didn't give a shit. You had a weight and you had a height, and if you were over that, you were in trouble, whether you were enlisted or an officer or whatever. They cut nobody, no slack. But that somehow has been lost from our society. But I guess we'll leave it there. I appreciate you, Luke.
Okay, take care, Kip. And thinking about Barack Obama, he couldn't shake his nicotine habit until 2011. So going back to the never Trump thing and the glorification of Obama and the silliness of taking any automatic reaction to public figures without regard to the situation. So if you don't take things personally and you're neither a fanboy nor just implacably hostile to a public figure, you'll think more clearly. On the other hand, there is just a tremendous amount of energy to be gained by taking things personally. So you often see athletes hyping themselves up for a performance by telling themselves, they don't do this to us. All right, if we win today, they'll never be able to take it away from us. This is about legacy. All right, they hype themselves up by taking things very personally. Bulletin board material is when the other team, members of the other team, says something disrespectful. So then your team puts it on the billboard to hype you up. So taking things personally is terrible for clarity, but it can often be fantastic for energy. And there are some situations where you need energy more than clarity. Overall, in general, in life, clarity, I don't know, in general, does clarity beat energy? There are certainly occasions where clarity beats energy, and then there are other occasions where energy beats clarity. So there will be some situations where it will be to your advantage to not take things personally. But if you're lacking fire, lacking energy, lacking drive, maybe you'd be able to regain all those fires by taking things personally. So I strive not to take things personally, but I recognize that there are significant advantages at times to taking things personally. So I think that should definitely be age verification before you're allowed access to pornography.
Our turned pastor who knows all about the seamy underworld of the porn industry. Brittany, Now, Pornhub, again, they say there should be age verification on the devices instead, but you say that that's not going to fix the problem. What's really going on with the money they make from young people having access to porn?
Yeah, I mean, they're deflecting accountability by saying that they don't want to follow a simple law, which is age verification for pornography. And I don't know exactly what they're doing with.
So pornographers were happy to sell child porn until that became illegal, and Congress cracked down on it with the Major Child Porn Act in 1977. So people will sell whatever makes them money. And it's a scandal that there's no effective age verification required to get access to pornography on the internet. We should be doing more as a society to protect our children. We should force people probably to register if they want access to pornography and just restrict pornography to certain domains. And you have to register with your internet service provider if you want access to those porn domains, right? Kids should not be allowed access to pornography
with their money, but I do believe that they are not out to protect young children. I do believe that when they create their content, they are permitting children to be able to watch it. I mean, 58% of minors that have watched pornography for their very first time, they watched it by stumbling upon it through a pop-up ad and so forth. And they weren't looking for porn. Porn was looking for them. And I believe that Pornhub knows that, because in Louisiana, their numbers went down by 80%.
And we should also make it really easy for people to opt out of any kind of internet gambling, because the lives of so many young men are being ruined right now, in particular by internet gambling.
When they allow, or when they put out age verification in Louisiana. So
yeah, one of Luigi Mangioni's friends was on camera saying that the suspected killer told him once that he himself was worried about young men steeping themselves in porn and what it was doing to relationships and so forth, and even his own. So that was, I mean, again, that's what his friend said he told him, but it looks like, I mean, by that, he was obviously at one point in his life
26%
entrenched in porn consumption, and like even people who are in it see what it does to them, and yet somehow showing.
Right. I'm A-OK with some social intervention to protect people from themselves. Right. I'm okay with seatbelt laws. Right. I'm okay with some restrictions on gambling and on pornography and on access device. So I don't know exactly where we should be drawing the line, but I do believe in some role of society and of government to incentivize people to do the right thing and to reduce their incentives to do the wrong thing, and to reduce the chances that they'll ruin their life through exposure to pornography or gambling.
Of young men who are exposed to gambling develop some sort of gambling problem. That seems very high. The NCAA, whose new president, Charlie Baker, was just shocked by the gambling activity he was seeing on campuses, commissioned a study to see how many people were doing this, and more than 60% of young men on college campuses are sports gambling. So you do the math. It's just like it's almost like we're creating a pool of future gambling addicts. About 1/3 still doesn't. And the industry here is dominated by two companies, FanDuel and DraftKings. They have, a little hard to say exactly, but say roughly 70% of the market. And they were, before they were sports gambling companies, they were daily fantasy sports companies, which they actually was the perfect thing to be before mobile sports gambling is legalized, is a daily fantasy sports company. You know all the customers, you have data on all the customers. Sports bets in America have skyrocket. It's a little hard to say, because it's hard to know what numbers to trust, because there was an illegal market that presumably is not quite as big as it used to be, but it's gone from, the legal market has gone from a few billion to over 100 billion a year. And there's just starting to be some academic research showing.
Right. If you have an account on FanDuel or DraftKings and they allow you to bet freely, that's because you're a sucker, right? If you're any good at betting, they'd restrict your account.
the social effects of this. I mean, it's kind of cool. The way it's rolled out has created these natural experiments that you have because you have states that are side by side. One has legalized it, one has not legalized it. So you can sort of tease out the effects of legalizing it. But bankruptcies are up, savings rates are down. If it follows the path that it followed in the United Kingdom and Australia, suicide rates will be up. So there's some social costs to it all. But I think like really early days. I mean, it's only been legal for 6 years. There were companies that have really only been up and running in most states for just a few years. It's kind of not hard to make some predictions about where it's going, but it's not there yet.
I'm a glass half empty kind of guy, but you cited some stats. This is a fucking disaster. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm totally with you. This is why I was drawn to the subject. I couldn't believe, well, look, once it's legalized, I'm a little shocked by the insensitivity to the public health crisis it's going to trigger, because it's essentially Wild West in how you can get to the customer. And they aren't, the sports gambling companies, they were mistaken for casino companies when the people kind of thought, oh, it's going to be like a casino business. So that the kind of VIG, what the house takes, about roughly 5%. It's always been kind of 5%. It will remain kind of 5%. This number keeps going up with these companies. They're like, it's like at 15%. And effectively what they are doing is mining the entire U.S. population for people willing to make stupid sports bets. And they have a finely honed ability to identify anybody who actually knows what they're doing, like the sharp gambler, someone who actually might have some edge in a sport, and toss them out or limit them to the point where they're effectively tossed out, so that their business is built on people who don't know what they're doing. And it's further in a way that, casinos, when you're in a casino, of course, is manipulating you in all kinds of diabolical ways. But when the casino's in your pocket, it's like your whole life is in the casino kind of thing. And they have an ability to sort of like nudge people into doing stuff that they just wouldn't think to do. And it's making the dumber and dumber bets. When you kind of think about, okay, like what's the disaster going to look like? It's not just men, it's young men. Young men are the real target. The Lancet, the British medical publication, just came out with a study that said, I mean, this number is so high that I want to just pause before I say it, but the 26% of young men who are exposed to gambling develop some sort of gambling problem. That seems very high, but even if it's half that, it's like the NCAA, whose new president, Charlie Baker, was just shocked by the gambling activity he was seeing on campuses, commissioned a study to see how many people were doing this, and more than 60% of young men on college campuses are sports gambling. So you do the math. It's just like it's almost like we're creating a pool of future gambling addicts. And you're right. It's very interesting. You're right about, like, when you think about what's going to stop this train, if you compare it to like opioids was able to run for 20 years before anybody really put a stop to it. And 750,000 people die. And it was about as visible an epidemic as you can have. This is, it's invisible. You don't see what's happening to people so you wonder if it takes 20 years for the society to get its hands around the opioid industry, how long is it going to take it to get its hands around the gambling industry? So yes, I agree with you. It's like, how on earth do we let this happen? But it's of a piece with other things we have let happen.
I mean, when I think about it, my fear isn't only about gambling addiction, but when you put kind of an on-demand dopa bag in young people's pockets, just as they're kind of hardwiring their brain and learning about life and reward, that we're just setting them up to be just fucking dopa monsters. And if they can't get it from gambling because they run out of money, they're going to find it somewhere else. Have you seen any of my thesis is we are literally unleashing into the economy, into the world, millions of dopa monsters that are just going to find whatever way they can, opiates, sex, porn, online shopping. They're just going to be so hungry for that rush because their brains will have been wired to expect that rush, that it's going to have all sorts of ramifications outside of gambling. Am I catastrophizing here?
I mean, it doesn't sound unreasonable to me. My first thought when you started down that little path was, it's interesting that sports used to be a place where you learned the slow rewards that come from
delayed
hard
gratification. Yeah.
Yeah, you learned the opposite thing. And that we're turning this mechanism that used to take young men and teach them a certain lesson, and we're taking it to teach a different lesson. So it was disturbing enough to me that I have my youngest is a 17-year-old son. Like, I gave him some money and adult supervision so he could learn how to navigate this world, because it does feel like not only are we creating a world of dopamine addicts, but the signal you send, especially to young men, because they're so susceptible to this, is the world actually doesn't give a shit about you. That it's out to get you. When I got into this, when I started.
So I was betting a lot in high school. I was my high school's bookie, and my teacher said, you can't do that here in the room because it's not good what's going on. You two are just enhancing your abilities to, rip each other off. And so he would send me out of the room. You want to be making bets? You want to be the bookie? Don't do it in front of me. And he was right. And eventually I realized I had a problem. And so by the time I finished high school, I quit gambling for life. All right, Patrice O'Neal here, speaking the truth about Hollywood and success.
They deal in money. You pay them dough. You here's your 10. Can I do my thing over here?
All right, he's talking about, I assume, his Jewish managers and agents.
Pay you this. I'm not big enough to get in big trouble, So is it possible that I can just do this? Here's your dough. Mm-hmm. And the thing I like about Jews, dealing with them as a cartel, is they don't want you to be Jewish. You don't have to join. You don't have to give anything but what you owe. Mm-hmm. You don't have to fucking, you don't have to fucking go to the parties.
You don't have to put on the yarmulke.
You don't have to do it.
No. Mm-hmm.
So it's a very fair thing. A lot of these cartels, man, you gotta be that.
Got to be in with them. And,
you got to be that. And
believe everything they believe in.
Yes.
Don't speak ill of them.
Yep.
Yep.
And the thing is, Tracy has to pay what he owes. And I knew that when Tina Fey turned on him. Tina Fey has been his great benefactor for many years.
Sure.
So this one thing has turned the tides of Tracy's career, meaning it's made him public enemy number one. When I heard this story pass one day, I said, Tracy's the new spokesman for gay shit now.
And that's exactly
we said yesterday, Patrice, that they grab you as a hostage.
You don't have to be a hostage.
But he's a hostage to GLAAD right now, and GLAAD will let Tracy know when they're done with him.
They're not ever going to be done with him because it's power. It's corruptible, man. Like when a bully takes your money, he don't go, thank you, I just needed it today.
He keeps going.
Tracy,
right.
Tracy had, I don't know how much money he got in the bank, but I would think it's enough to say no. Leave me alone.
Fuck you.
But he sets himself up where Tracy doesn't have. Like if I'm saying this, I'll hear from Tracy, meaning, yo, don't talk shit about. Shut the fuck up, nigga. Like don't. I'm on your side. I know what you're going through, but I made a decision. That's why people go, well, why Patrice isn't? I don't want to owe that much. Mm-hmm. I don't, because there's people that count on me to have. Like a revolutionary attitude sometimes, just where I argue.
Yeah.
So I let a lot of people down if I put myself in a position to have to flop around on my belly.
Have to be a spokesperson like that, or right.
That's why I talk so much, because I want people to understand what I'm saying. Now, if I talk about gays and talk about anything I have a problem with, I'm going to make sure if they're going to end my career, that it's a muscle move, that it's unfair. That it's not just because Tracy just goes faggots, 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 and more faggots. And if my son was a faggot, and then you go, Tracy, what the fuck? He didn't say nothing to apologize for. Mm-hmm. What are you apologizing for?
Yeah, you were doing your act.
But he's
on a comedy stage.
But the people who make you owe, they go, this guy is setting himself up to owe us big, because we're allowing him to feel himself. I'm going to pull my stomach out. I'm going to go crazy. I'm going to be drunk. I'm going to fucking get DUIs. I'm going to fall downstairs. I'm going to get a kidney from a bitch and leave her. I'm going to do all kind of shit.
Holy shit.
I'm going to do all kind of shit.
Yeah.
And then I feel like I'm invincible. Then I do something that I do all the time. Faggots, faggots. And now, his benefactor. Tracy. We're disgusted with him. And now they pick him up by the fucking hem of his neck and the back of his drawers and toss him out into every gay thing. Tracy's from the hood.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to be dealing with all
Tracy's from the hood. You understand?
Yeah.
You're going to you're now the new, from a guy who just goes faggots to the understanding, delicious spokesman for gayness. Right. You got to watch. These motherfuckers watch TV and see the trends. There's a commercial I hate so much.
I am a student of commercials, by the way.
I hate this commercial so much. I don't know how to approach how much I hate it. Because gay also means happy.
Sure does.
Now, we can play that game, but gay does mean happy. Homosexuals have commandeered the word gay into where it's not happy anymore. Because there's a commercial, because the boss of the Phoenix Suns came out the closet. The boss of the Phoenix Suns is gay. And they do a commercial where they're playing basketball and the guy's like, hey, man, you suck.
Yep.
Hey, man, you ain't nothing. Hey, man, you ain't got no jump shot. And then one guy goes, yeah, your moves are gay.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And then he has some of the Phoenix Suns are the spokesman like, hey, man, that's not cool to say that. Gay is... What?
They don't believe that.
Motherfucker, so now... No. Fucking moms. Like, look, here's what we all let happen. We all let context be destroyed.
Yeah.
Context is gone.
And that was
I can't slip up. I can't say nothing. You can't understand you don't feel me? You don't feel what I'm saying? Look, what he did, I can't go, oh, I can defend that. But I will say this. Here's what happens with Tracy, and here's what can happen. And, you know, I believe in conspiracies, man. It just sets people up who want to control everyone, right? Where you go, okay, Tracy, a guy like Tracy, he isn't qualified to have an opinion. Just having an opinion, it should be in the hands of people who are qualified intellectually. So guys like him, if he don't have a degree, they'll start making language elite where you can't have an opinion. But I say Tracy can be as ignorant, as fucked up as he wants to be, because I want to be able to communicate. And if I'm fucked up, let me be fucked up. But I support anything as long as you're not hitting me and robbing me.
Right.
Hate speech. Why can't I hate you? Why the fuck? But see, the dilemma in my head is this. Back in the 1910s, 8-year-old kids worked in the coal mine or whatever.
Yeah.
And people back then thought that it built character.
Yeah.
But then we go up to our age where our parents hit us. And now we go, oh, that built character when you hit it. So I'm saying, the point I'm making is, maybe I'm antiquated. Maybe I'm thinking old, because I don't think kids should work in coal mines.
Yeah.
But I do think kids should get hit. But now you can't even tease kids in school. It's bullying and
bullying, very important.
So
yeah.